if you want to put an idea into the world, you have to be ready to grapple with being misunderstood, which is really very unpleasant. Okay. So like, I remember before Clay Christensen died, I idolized him. He was like such a giant and such a gentle and kind person. His number one contribution that he's most known for is a phrase he called disruptive innovation. Every startup-y person you've ever met finds this concept extremely helpful. But it was so successful that the general concept of disruption became like a buzzword that everybody in Silicon Valley and beyond uses all the time, including quite often in ways that are not compatible with Clay. So a business journalist had just decided one day that any bad thing that a company had ever done while using the word disruption were the fault of Clay Christensen. And they wrote this big, long takedown of him that this is all his fault. My first reaction was my blood was just boiling.
Oh, yeah, on his behalf.
He was at the end of his life at that point, and I was just like, I can't believe somebody who's like, all that he's accomplished has to read this piece of garbage, and I was ready to like set the whole journalism industry on fire. And then I had this moment where I was like, wait a minute. If this can happen even to Clay, is this my future?
Welcome to Pivot. Welcome to This Is Not Advice, where you'll hear from successful people in different occupations about how they do every part of their jobs. I'm Roy Bahat. I'm an MBA professor, and I'm a startup investor in the future of work at the venture capital firm Bloomberg Beta. And I want you to be able to learn from the people who I get to learn from. I want you to be powerful. And I believe that power comes from knowing how to do the thing. So even if you'll never be a doctor or a painter or a book author, knowing how people who are great at their game play it might help you play yours. And as usual, this is not advice because the people who we're speaking with have no idea what you should do in your career. They just know their own story. And today I wanted to learn about what it means to be an author. Less how to do that as a full-time job, and more if you have another occupation and you have something important you want to say, how do you do it? And what an example of that we have in Eric Ries. Eric wrote The Lean Startup, a book that gave the startup world its own vocabulary, the MVP, pivot, and 2 million copies later, those words are part of our lingua franca. But Eric actually wasn't trying to be a writer. He was a software engineer who kept having to explain the same things over and over again and just got tired of it. He typed his first blog post on a Palm Treo at a Starbucks on Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, and he did it anonymously because people told him that blogging was career suicide. So in today's episode, Eric walks us through his journey from start to finish, how a blog becomes a community, how a community finds a book, what it's actually like to write and rewrite again, and how to do several more books, including his latest, Incorruptible. Incorruptible is about how companies can stick to the original intentions of the people who build them. And Eric is going to share how this book was different, how he got 600 test readers to write 10,000 comments on his manuscript, and what happens when your ideas become so big that they stop belonging to you. Welcome, and remember, this is not advice. We're here to talk about how to be an author. And I think one of the ways that your career feels to me emblematic of many authors is you're not actually a person who said, I'm going to start my career and all I'm going to do is write books. It's not the only thing that you do now. In fact, I don't even know how much of your time, how you think about what it's been. And so actually, before we zoom in on being an author and the particular kind of author that you've been, which, nonfiction for sure. I don't know if you even think of it this way. Business books, is that
what do genres even mean anymore?
Publishers categories, fine.
Yeah, we'll discuss.
But my point is that you're not a reporter, but you do interview people and do a lot of research. And so it's a certain kind of a thing. But just look, before we zoom in on your authorship, put it in the context of like Eric's personal and professional life. How and when did it fit in, and where did that start?
Well, like when I look back on my life, writing was always a part of all the things that I did. I feel like I've often done things where like I either did something and then wrote about it, or I learned how to do a thing by writing about it. And then so it's always been there. But I didn't conceive of myself as an author growing up or anything like that. I didn't expect or aspire to be a writer. I wasn't one of those people that's like, I'm going to write the great American novel. What happened is like I kept doing things that then would lead me to try to teach things or explain things, which when it would start to get cumbersome because there would be no book about it. And then I would wind up writing that book. That's basically been the pattern of my life.
It's funny. That's my blog post pattern too.
Yeah. So, and that's how I started with blog posts. And
right. Of course. I remember like I came across your blog might have been the early 2000s, something like that. But what counts as an early 2000s, I don't even know.
I could tell you literally the time I wrote my first blog post. I still remember it very well. This would have been the fall of 2008.
Okay.
Right in the midst of the Great Recession as it's like crashing down around us.
Your piece on Don't Launch is one that I still send around. And I just know because it's in the URL that piece is from 2009.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you used writing as a tool to solve your own problem, which I kind of think of as a software engineer's problem, which is the don't repeat yourself problem.
Yeah, it was an efficiency thing and a bunch of stuff. But so I didn't think of myself that way, but someone reminded me that I had completely forgotten that my first like real startup I did while I was still in college. I was in college during the dot-com bubble. We were like the last soldiers killed in a war. Okay, we were like the last startup to get the memo about the dot-com bubble. I caught the very last tail end of the dot-com bubble. Anyway, I had completely forgotten that after the whole thing crashed and the startup went out of business, I was like thinking about open sourcing the software. I was trying to figure out like what to do with it. And apparently I had like written some kind of proposal to like write a book about it for O'Reilly, like a technical book about some of the thing, not like a startup lessons learned book, but much more like, here's how to make this kind of software product. So I guess like even then somehow the idea of like doing the work and then writing about it like seemed natural to me. But yeah, no, I was not a writer. I was a computer programmer.
And so but do you remember the moment at which you said, this one's going to be a book?
For Lean Startup, yeah, I do remember. So here's how it happened. I had done IMVU.
So that was one of your startups.
One of the startups I did.
And I remember it was avatars. I mean, we talked during that period. Yep.
Way ahead of its time, metaverse kind of company. I think that was like 2004 to 8 or something like that, rough time frame. And I had left the company. It was like classic situation where like we had brought in a professional CEO. I was the CTO. And I could just tell at a certain point that like I was not the right partner for him. And I was like, I don't want to be one of those founders that I have to kick out. So I'm like, I made a graceful transition plan and had a ramp down and the whole thing. So one of the things I had developed in my leadership at IMVU was this alternative set of startup practices that now we call Lean Startup. But in those days, we didn't know what to call it. Lean Startup was not my first attempt at a metaphor to explain these concepts to people. I had really been like pulling my hair out, trying to figure out how do I explain this to people in a way that they could find satisfying. Because I had engineer after engineer after engineer who come to me and I'd be like, don't you want to look at the evidence that this works better? No, nobody wants to ever decide anything by evidence. That's so
sure,
naive.
Of course, they want a story.
But like they're okay, even if I believe this evidence, why does it work? And I didn't know. So I had read every business book that had been written up to that point. I mean, I read everything. I was like desperately trying to find solutions. How do I explain this to people? And I kept having this experience where I was like, surely if I find the right Peter Drucker book, or like the right strategy book or whatever, I'll turn to chapter 7
Somebody
and it'll
must
be
have
like,
done this.
Yeah, that would be like, oh, here's what to do if you're in a startup and you have this problem. I was like, oh, finally. And I kept not finding it. So I was like really trying to figure this out. So I had developed this set of metaphors and stories and concepts drawing on a bunch of different traditions. And when I left the company, people were immediately on me to give advice to other startups, which is, as you know, is a totally common Silicon Valley thing, but this was my first time. So all these VCs wanted to hang out with me all of a sudden. Because when I first started talking about this stuff, people were super pissed. Nobody was interested in this theory. It was like, it can't have gone any worse. You can't even imagine now in 2008 and 9 how people were just like, what the bleep are you talking about? It just seemed really countercultural people.
What made them mad?
Okay, now I think I understand it better than I did then. So some VC would say, would you please come talk to one of my portfolio companies? Which I thought that's the best way in to a founder's heart is through their VC. But in retrospect, maybe not the best.
When people ask us to promote things to our portfolio, I'm like, sure, only if you want them not to do it.
Right. And I realized later what was going on is a lot of people were reaching out to me because they had some portfolio company that they was going too slow. And they're like, we've heard that you have the magic power to make engineers work harder and go faster. And I'd be like, no, sir, actually, I have this better theory of how management. And they'd be like, could you just sprinkle some of that magic pixie dust on our teams for us? So anyway, I should have known this was a trap. So I go into these meetings and I'd be like, hi, here's what worked for us at IMVU. You know, we did this minimum viable product. We ship software today, 50 times a day on average. And that was really the like trigger for a lot of people because they'd be like, that's not true. That could never work. And I'd be like, oh, well, good news. I saw it with my own eyes. and literally did this with my bare hands. I could answer any level of detailed question about this that you would like. And they'd be like, no, you can't. No, it's not. Like people get mad. Like they asked me to leave. Like it was very tense.
Wild.
Very upset they would get about it. And at a certain point I would have to be like, look, you called me. I don't work here. I don't have any upside in this company. Like I have no reason to be here except to do you a favor and you're mad. Next time, please don't call. Like the first time it happened, I was like, I guess I'm really bad at explaining this. But like the fifth time it happened, I started to get very defensive about it and like worried, like I don't like this experience. And a bunch of people had told me not to blog. That was like considered like kind of taboo still at those times.
Because you'd be giving away your secrets?
Two reasons. One, it was seen as career suicide because like the people who are publicity seeking are not serious founders. And this is so different than it is today. We were not yet all publicity hounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had gotten a part-time job at a big like famous VC firm.
I see.
And I remember one of the partners took me aside one day and was like, listen, it seems like you're like basically giving away all this valuable information about startups. Why don't we use that for our portfolio's proprietary advantage instead? And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And so I joked I can remember when I started blogging because I had a Palm Treo. It had a keyboard, physical keyboard, and internet connection sometimes. But it had like a scratch pad. And I can remember sitting in the Starbucks on Sand Hill Road, you know, not far from my office. And I had been like mulling over some of these stories in my head. I have an hour to kill or whatever. I don't remember why I had this like gap in my schedule. So I was like, I'm just going to try on this crappy little keyboard. I'm going to type out some thoughts and just see what it feels like to write about some of this stuff. Like I could never have even, like, I couldn't have even admitted to myself that I wanted to write it down because I've gotten so much advice that it was a bad idea. But I was like, this is my private diary. And I tapped out the first couple blog posts.
Interesting.
And I didn't even post them anywhere. I carried them around in my pocket for weeks, I think, just being like, should I do it? Should I not do it anyway? And then like one day I was like, you know what the heck? I'll go on Blogger and start a blog. And the thing that you got to understand is I did it anonymously. I was so embarrassed about it that my name did not appear on the blog for a long time. Steve Blank actually, I think, was the one who had suggested Startup Lessons Learned as the title of the blog. I realize now how passive aggressive it was. It was Startups Lessons Learned in the past tense. Learned by whom? Like not learned by, just the lessons had learned themselves. The startups, there were lessons learned.
So you signed up for an account on Blogger.
I started the blog. I copy pasted the first couple of things from my Treo. And then I would like every once in a while, I would write one of these essays. And they started out there. If you look, it's all still online. I haven't deleted any of these posts. They're all still there. They're short. They're not that great. The one that I coined the phrase lean startup is like 3 paragraphs long. I was just like, oh, I'm thinking about what to call this thing. And I could call it this, I could call it that. But what the hell? I think this is the right thing. And here's why. Anyway, but I would occasionally write more narrative style stuff. Like I had a series called like the Product Manager's Lament and the Engineering Manager's Lament. Like they were a little bit more like talking about people in the trap that the best practices of that time cause for people. Like there are these systemic forces that leave actual people like basically screwed and they get blamed for the systemic thing. So those posts went really viral for that time. They were very excited. And the way you can understand how unlikely it was that people would be a startup blogger is that I can still remember the 3 most prominent startup bloggers at the time.
Fred Wilson.
No.
Oh, not yet?
This is not even that, right? Like the VC bloggers were not that well known even then. Like if you were in the know, you knew Mark Andreessen had a blog.
Wild. I mean, I remember his blog had some great posts on hiring and firing. Like there was a lot of simple.
The P Marka blog archive has had some real bangers on it. And like, I was like, so there were people writing essays, like Mark would write those essays. Paul Graham, of course, is active at this time, but they were not universally known at all.
Interesting.
The people who were writing like active daily startup blogs, the biggest ones at the time were Dave McClure, Sean Ellis, and was it Andrew Chen or Nivi? I can't remember who the third person was. Like 3 of them reached out to me cold because my traffic started showing up in their HTTP refer logs.
Fascinating.
That's how little the logs had in them that if a new person linked to your blog, you noticed. And they were like, who is this guy?
But so what's interesting about that is,
so
you know, just to talk about like what sparked you into, let's just say book authorship. You know, it's not, I had this writing guru who told me to write, my childhood English teacher or whatever.
No, certainly not.
I mean, obviously writing was part of the practice. And I hear that for you as kind of twinned with the precision of lots of other things you did, like coding.
Yeah, it's the same brain structure to me. It's why I could never really code and write at the same time. I would alternate.
Which, by the way, is ironic because now we're back in an era where the way people, not back, but we're in an era now where the way you code is by writing. But let's set that aside.
That's how it's always been. This is the meme where it's like, yeah, coding is language. Yeah, always has been.
Always has been.
And to be clear, like I took writing classes as a kid. My parents were very keen that I should have a liberal arts education. I always studied writing.
Got it.
I only wanted to do computer programming, but my parents were worried that that was not a good career.
Like writing.
Yeah, exactly.
Wild how everything old is new again. But also, one of the things I've noticed about many of the most successful leaders in our industry,
Yeah.
I saw this in government too. They're either really good writers or
Yeah.
really good editors or both. And like I think about like my former boss, Dan Doctoroff, exceptional writer. You know, Mike Bloomberg has, I mean, the process, I can't speak to the editing and writing because I'm not that close to it.
Yeah.
But like the stuff that comes out is really good. You know, I remember some of Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg's early stuff was
great,
really
yeah.
good. But so then you have this success. And so here's the interesting thing about it turning into a book to me is you're having this blogging success of something emergent. And in the startup world, when something starts to succeed, we keep doing more of that thing. And so, you didn't say, I'm going to go blog more. You said at some point, actually, I need to go back to this ancient technology called a book.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about what does the blog to book pipeline look like?
As every overnight success is, this thing was multiple years in the making, and each phase had a really distinct character to it. So like there was quite a while where I was just writing these posts and nobody was reading them. I actually wrote a blog post called "Lo, My 5 Readers, Who Are You?" Because like I ran a survey. I had 5 subscribers and I was like, who are these 5? I was like, why would anybody be a subscriber? Who are you? What's going on? Of course, the number one response I got in that survey was like, who the F are you? Because I was still anonymous. They were like, we don't want to get these lessons from an anonymous person. Anyway, so it was really interesting. Like there was this long flat part of the hockey stick and then it just started to go crazy as people discovered the thing and got really excited about it. And then I was in this really, the most fun part of this is that feedback loop you're in where just like you have so much I wanted to say, so
product
many
market fit as one might describe
it. Just pulled it right out of me. So the more I write, the more people are excited about it. Twitter is just emerging at this time. So then like someone, you know, every good thing that happens, somebody just came to me and was just like, I have some advice for you. You know, you need to be on, everyone's on Twitter now. If you have a blog to promote, you got to be there. So I was like, sure, why not? You know, whatever. Then I started to get asked to speak. And then you get in this virtuous feedback loop. Someone explained it to me this way. They said, everybody who makes their living either writing or speaking or consulting actually does all three, because that is an integrated business model where the more you do one of the things, the more you do the other. So if you consult, you'll give you things to write about. If you write, you'll be asked to speak. If you speak, you'll get consulting engagements.
Makes total sense.
Around this. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is a thing. So I'll just do this thing. I, read a book about like how to be a public speaker. I read a book about like how to do consult. I like didn't even know what a consulting contract was. I didn't even know what consulting was at all. So I was like very, very noob to all this stuff. And I can still remember the great Tim O'Reilly was the first like person of significance with a capital S to discover my work and summon me for a meeting, which happened to be many, many times in the years since. But it was the first. It's so distinctive to me because I can really remember. And he was a legend. I had all my. Those days, my bookshelf was all O'Reilly books. He's like, "Will you come to Sebastopol for a meeting?" And I'm like, "Oh, I get to meet the Tim O'Reilly." I was like, "This was like super cool." He might have been the first person to be like, "Here's what's going to happen now. You're going to be on the speaking circuit. You're going to need to write a book. You're going to you're onto something here."
Oh, so he put the idea in your head that a natural lily pad step in going from that holy triumvirate of writing, speaking, consulting, but with blogging as your writing anchor. And what's also interesting is you didn't go try to get a column in some newspaper or something.
No,
like
yeah,
that.
I know. No one ever suggested that to me.
Yeah,
I don't know why. It never even came up.
But you then decided to say, I'm going to do a book.
So I didn't decide then. He had me talk to like their publishing people, and they were like, it was like, as these things often are, like they were like perseverating, but should we offer him a publishing contract or not or whatever? And meanwhile, the thing's blowing up. So like when he introduced me to them, I was like this very obscure figure. And then over the course of them like debating about, it's like such a classic venture story too, where you're like, while you're debating whether or not you want to give this person the time of day, the thing blows up and now they're at a different level. That actually happened here. And a really great editor from HarperCollins reached out to me and was like, "Hey, have you ever considered writing a book?" Harvard Business Review reached out to me to be like, "Hey, have you ever considered writing?" So I started to get inbound about it, starting to think about like, oh, that actually sounds like it could be fun. And at the time I was conceiving it kind of like Paul Graham's Hackers and Painters or something like that, where it's like a collection of essays. Cause I was like, oh, I already have these essays. They were also like publishing startups that were at that time, people thought they were going to revolutionize the publishing industry with technology. So I remember somebody pitched me, there was a company called LeanPub. That's what it was called, LeanPub. And they would take your RSS feed of a blog and turn it into a physical book.
Interesting.
I did an experiment with them that you can actually, somewhere in the world exists. I must have it in my house or somewhere.
Basically a paper-bound, Dead Trees printed version of Startup Lessons Learned.
We conceived of it like the DVD box set you could buy for a time. Startup Lessons Learned Season 1, the book.
I love it.
Which nobody ever did. But anyway, so I'm like dabbling in this stuff, trying to understand it. And the first person I talked to that was like a very successful author in the mainstream way was Tim Ferriss. Now he's such a big deal as a podcaster, but in those days he had just had this big success with the 4-hour work week. And, you know, a friend introduced us and, you know, we were chatting and I was like, oh, I'm thinking about doing this thing. And he was like, do not sign anything until we talk. And I'm like, okay, like whatever you say, sure. And now, you know, he got it. And he was so generous with me, actually. I owe him a lot because he got me on the phone. He was like, let me explain to you how publishing works. Let me like introduce you to some agents. Let me like open some doors for you. So at this point, I was like, okay, I understand the what, like how to write a book now, like from a publishing perspective. But I was like, but why? I'm like, I'm in the hot new avant-garde technology of blogging. Why am I going to do this? You know, like what?
Mushing up dead trees.
Yeah. What is the point of it? And so I went on this odyssey. Like, so you have these phases. So I'm getting more and more famous, like in my little tech bubble. I mean, right.
Yeah. We got you. Don't worry.
But I'm like having these cool experiences and getting to speak and like, you know, travel a little bit. Like I remember doing the first like European tour with Lean Startup. All these like people like organized all these amazing events for me, like on Twitter. I was like, literally like, I posted on Twitter, I've been invited to this thing in Europe. Anyone else in Europe want to do a thing? And this is back when if you posted something on a social media algorithm, all your followers would see it, not like today. So like I went to sleep and in the morning I had like 7 invites to go to 7 different countries in Europe. It was just an incredible time. What a time.
Amazing.
So different than today. Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's that line that you have about like entrepreneurs being everywhere. It's almost like, I feel like the writing brought all of these folks out of the woodwork who just wanted to welcome you. The writing is everywhere. The learning is everywhere. I mean, it's like almost like a distributed college course kind of a vibe.
You know what you're reminding me now is Emil Ephraim, the CEO of Neo4j, the graph database company, super successful entrepreneur. He's from Sweden. He had like tracked me down in South of Market in the Bay Area from Sweden. And he was like, I really want to get you involved with my startup. I really think this is the future. And like, and I want to bring you to Sweden. And I was like, okay,
sure.
The thing I really want to emphasize about all this is how much serendipity was involved. Like my job really primarily was to like be discerning about what things to say yes to versus like I was the magic driver of this thing and made it happen. So yeah, like he created the venue for me to go for the first time. And that would then all these other people self-organize all these things. And it was super cool. Like I can remember, here's a deep cut for you.
Please.
I'd been invited to speak at like a tech meetup thing in Paris, and different cultures organize these things differently. And the level of organization is very different.
Italy versus Sweden, probably different.
Italy versus Sweden was hilariously different. Anyway, in Paris, you know, they had to say, come to this address for your talk. And the address is one of those massive super blocks they have in Paris where it's like, there's no through traffic. It's like apartment buildings and the street's a marketplace and it's walkable thing, but it's like a 6-block radius, like mega thing. All I have is the address of this mega thing.
Fascinating.
I don't know where to go. So we're like wandering around this like bazaar, trying to figure out where to go. And my wife points at someone. She's like, just follow this guy. And I'm like, why? She's like, he's dressed like a Silicon Valley person.
That's
it's like a guy like with a ponytail and a hoodie and whatever.
She's like, sandals and shorts.
She was like, he's going to the meetup. And I was like, you shouldn't jump to conclusions about whatever. She's like, okay, but just follow him. We follow him straight to the meetup. And it was like, I walk in this meetup and I'm like, I'm in Paris and everything is like so different. And then all of a sudden I'm home. It's all my people and everyone's like so happy for me to be there and we're having a great time. That happened. I've had that experience in like 20 countries now. It's just incredible.
I love that. I mean, look, one of the ways in which I think the tech industry still has this part of its magic from then is the feeling of a shared culture across places.
It is total magic. And I mean, so much of this is a story about the internet and the early internet in particular. I'm having this cool experience left, right, and center. And remember, nominally, I'm still thinking that this is my interim
You're going to do your next
sabbatical
startup
on my way to my next startup. So the other thing I'm doing is like trying to understand, what does a startup CEO actually do? Which I really was not clear on any time in the early parts of my startup career. I eventually came to the conclusion that nobody seemed to have any clue about it.
Because you had been the technical co-founder.
I'd always been the technical co-founder. I always write the software.
Yeah.
I was like, that business is not my thing. And I kept running into these situations where the business people would make the key decisions that would cause nobody to use my product. So I was like, this needs to stop happening. But when I would go around and ask people questions that I thought were like the most basic questions that everyone would know the answer to, surely. Things like, when should you release your first product? If you have customers, when should you listen to their feedback and when should you ignore it? All these people, including very fancy people, very successful people, all these VCs and everything, they'd always answer these questions like this. They'd be like, well, here's how Steve Jobs did it that one time. Or like, I was actually hanging out with Mark Benioff the other day and he told me that he did it this way. And I'd be like, okay, well, that's two different things. Which one should I use? And they'd be like, it's not my business. I'm here. And it was all these just so stories. And I just was so frustrated. Like, I would go to startup conferences in those days and there would be like 10 speakers in a row, each telling you what to do. So after the first speaker, I was like, I know what to do. And then after the second speaker, I'd be like, now I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because both speakers sounded great.
Well, but it's similar to the advice that VC was giving you, where on the one hand, they were saying, don't do this, keep it proprietary. And on the other hand, it's like, wait a minute, maybe I should do the opposite.
It was very confused. So anyway, so I was like, okay, if I'm confused, a lot of people are confused, and I'm writing about the confusion and trying to do something about it. When people ask me for advice now, I can just send them the blog post and be like, if you think this is crazy, please don't invite me to your meeting to yell at me. So like, it was really like a self-preservation thing.
Disqualifying out, basically.
Yeah. It was like my inbound funnel filtering self-selection mechanism. Anyway, I eventually had the insight that this was turning into a movement. You remember the Web 2.0 Expo?
Of course. Another O'Reilly creation.
The dearly departed Web 2.0 Expo. Well, for me, that was a huge invite. I got invited to speak at the Web 2.0 Expo. Not the like keynote stage or anything, but like in one of the breakout things. But it was still in Moscone Center, big room.
I remember.
They were experimenting with something they called the unconference. So the idea was you speak at the conference for the paid attendees, and then you go to a different room that is for like a breakout session where you can answer questions, somewhere else. I'd never done this before, so I didn't know what to expect. But I took this incredibly seriously. Like I had a customer advisory board for this talk.
Wow.
I worked it incredibly hard. I was like, I'm going to get this exactly right. I promoted the heck out of it on social media and on my blog. I was like, this is the thing, come to this. And especially because if you wanted to come to the unconference bit, you could get in for free.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to have a paying ticket. So anyway, I get there and this room holds like maybe 700 people and it's completely packed to the gills, standing room only, because nobody knew who I was. Like I achieved this level of fame semi-anonymously, and then I turned out to be this like coming out. I didn't know any of this. I thought that was perfectly normal. I found out later that the other people who were scheduled to speak in that time slot all hate me.
You know what? You can send them when your new book Incorruptible is out.
Yeah, exactly.
You can send them thank you copies.
Their sacrifice was not in vain.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I had an absolute panic reaction to this. I had never really done public speaking. I'd given a couple talks ever. But I did like debate and stuff in college. So like I had done some of it, but I didn't like it that much. I loved ideas. And that seemed like when I was younger, I thought those are the people who are interested in ideas. I never thought that you'd have ideas in business. That seemed contradictory to me. So I had this moment of total panic. And I was like backstage, like freaking out, being like, what have I done with my life? Because remember, everyone had told me this is a bad idea. The more you become an attention-seeking person, the less seriously people will take you as an engineer, as a founder.
And I saw that, by the way, too. Like I remember when some VC was blogging and I was in a board meeting with other VCs, they were just like, I think it was mostly motivated by jealousy, to be honest, when people used to say that. But they're like, well, if he looks up from his keyboard long enough to actually work on a company.
Totally. Oh,
and meanwhile, I was like, but his blog posts are way more useful than all his fucking pearls of wisdom you got. So.
Yeah. So anyway, I was like, you know what? I can't do this unless I can figure out why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay. The thing that got me out of my crisis in that moment was, if there's even one person in this audience who is about to have the experience that I've had multiple times already in my career of building something that nobody wants and the heartbreak of starting a company and having it fail, like if I can save one person from that fate, it's worth it. It's worth it. If 799 people hate it,
yeah,
but it helps one person,
I love that.
That's enough.
Look, you had empathy for that founder's pain, having built
Totally.
stuff that people did not want and stuff that people did want. I also feel that, like, when I co-founded a company, actually even before that, building products and trying to get stuff going, it's like you cook up a story in your head of why people want something.
Yeah.
And then you do all this work to bring it into the world, only to realize, and to me, this is maybe the emotional core of what made the lean startup resonant for me. I would have build something or get a team to build something,
Yeah.
release it, and then it would fail for a reason that we could have figured out
We
earlier.
could have figured out.
If
It was
only
so
we had been
obvious in
systematic
retrospect.
in identifying what the assumptions are. Even for the video game company that we co-founded, in a way, we went to Kickstarter as a way of testing whether anybody wanted it early. And thank goodness it worked. But also by that point, we'd only spent, I don't know, $75,000, not
Totally. Oh,
$7.5
yeah.
million, and all that kind of stuff.
You were very generous, by the way. Like, you were one of the first big company people, quote unquote, to allow me to tell their story. That was back at a time when we desperately needed the credibility of like big companies.
What's funny is I don't think of it as generosity. The way, like, I think the funny thing about writing, one funny thing about writing is it can produce these moments where somebody becomes heroic to you
Yeah.
without regard to whether they are big, small, they
Yeah.
look left, they look right, blonde hair, brown hair, like gender, whatever. What I saw in that was because you had shared some of it in public, we figured
Yeah.
whatever you would elaborate on it must be even more valuable.
Even more valuable.
And
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
like, I
Exactly.
thought you were doing us a favor. Okay, but I
Totally.
see this motivation, which is you have this hypothetical human who you perceive to be headed toward pain, and you can alleviate their pain by writing and in that case by sharing with a talk.
Speaking.
Yep.
And so there's a before and after of my life from this talk because, it was a huge success. Everyone loved it. It was great. I didn't know this at the time, but Nivi from Venture Hacks was in the audience. He made a bootleg recording. Web 2.0 Expo didn't video record and post on YouTube.
Amazing.
The only recording of this talk is the bootleg recording he made on his iPhone. iPhone had just come out and had a memo record thing on it. And he was just holding up an iPhone. I didn't know this. He posted it on SlideShare along with my deck. And that was like a samizdat version of my ideas circulating
the
around.
concert bootleg. And just for the
bootleg.
folks who don't know the inside outs of the startup world as well,
Yeah.
Venture Hacks, if I remember, was a compendium of advice posts about startups, about
About how to raise money and stuff like
and
that.
then
Yeah, totally.
Eventually, some of that activity turned into what became AngelList, which of course became enormously influential. But to think it was all so ragtag then is kind of wild.
It's really wild. I still had my office at the fancy venture firm, and now they're starting to get really antsy about it because it went from like, why are you doing this when you could be helping our portfolio? The next thing they were upset about is that
we want a piece.
They were like, you're trading on our name inappropriately. So stop telling people that you're like from our, like they wanted to dissociate themselves from it because they thought I was like vampire squidding their fame and success. It was not great. Anyway, I get this call from Scott Cook's office at Intuit.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody sent the bootleg recording to Scott Cook.
Fascinating.
His office sent an inquiry to the venture firm. Can we please have a meeting with Eric Ries?
Now they're like, wait, maybe this is actually useful.
Totally. Like the secretary, like I've never seen any of these people before. Like, so shows up in my office, like, Mr. Scott Cook will request your presence at a meeting. So I'm like summoned. And now I'm like, oh no, I'm in trouble. The principal's calling me into the office. He was so generous. He's been such an incredible supporter of mine over the years. And he was like, I want to put this into practice at Intuit. For me personally, it was like, this is working. I'm getting to do cool stuff. People like it. Like people I admire. Like the idea that Tim O'Reilly and Scott Cook were like real people. They were like icons to me. It was like, oh, this is a person. I could go meet that person.
First of all, I love the kind of satisfaction that comes from a happy accident where something works. You published a blog post not thinking, but there's a different kind of satisfaction, which is also profound, about saying, I'm going to choose this moment as a moment that I'm going to invest time, effort, and energy
and do a good
into
job.
getting it right and doing a good job. You take the time, you pull in the relationships, you put your identity on the line, and then it works. That's like beautiful too.
It was amazing. And I'll tell you the funniest part about it. So I mentioned it was the unconference, right? I leave the stage, I get a big ovation. I really felt good. I'm like, wow, this worked. I felt so good. I'm like, my day is basically done. But I have this trade-off of getting to get all these people into the conference for free. Was I had to go do this like separate session in a different room and trying to figure out where is room 305 or whatever it was. I'm like, find the room. And the whole hallway getting into the room is just packed up with people waiting to go in the room. So I'm just waiting in line. And I'm like, God, the previous speaker is being very rude. Like, they're supposed to be done so I can go in the room and do this thing. And I'm just sitting there like an idiot. And someone who used to work for me is in the line and sees me there. And he's like, oh, hey, how's it going? I saw your talk. Like, good job. And I was like, oh, so I was all embarrassed. I was like, you didn't think I like overrepresented what we did together in that company? He's like, no, it's all fine. He's like, but I have a question. Like, why aren't you going in the room? And I'm like, oh, I'm waiting for the previous speaker to finish. And he's like, you moron. There's no previous speaker. All these people are here for you. I was so anonymous that I could stand in the line to get into my own talk and not a single person recognized me. Like, I had no idea.
Well, there was before the era of the little thumbnail sketch photo.
So wild. And I was like, what are all these people doing here? And it was really a profound moment for me because I had to like squeeze my way into this like utterly overfull situation. And I was like, okay, the feeling in the room, the energy of people, I was like, okay, this is real. This is not just about me.
It's a delicious moment. Wait, and so
it was super cool.
But now I'm gonna like try to fast forward you for a second. When did it turn into a book?
So that's probably 2 years from then to a book.
And so wait, so let me make sure that I'm talking about the arc, which is that talk was about the lean startup as a methodology?
Yes.
Okay. So that talk was the talk length version, let's say, of what ultimately evolved into the book.
Correct. Yeah.
And 2 years till the book came out. But when did you decide to do a book?
So it must have been around, I don't remember exactly, but it would have been around then.
Okay.
When it started to become a movement. So now I'm being asked to speak and travel. And Rich Collins called me out of the blue one day and he was like, do I have your permission to start a lean startup meetup in San Francisco?
Who is Rich Collins? Just a guy?
Just a guy.
Awesome.
I mean, in my life, he's the guy who did the first lean startup meetup. And I was like, look, I think that's the worst idea I've ever heard, but you know, you don't need my blessing really. Like do what you do if you want to do it. He's like, well, if I host it, will you come? I was like, yes.
Yeah.
You know, I walked from my house to this meetup and there was a zillion people there. And people started setting up these meetups all over the world. Like it became a real thing.
It's so interesting. So look, just to say in terms of where we are in this conversation, the point I want to make is actually a meta point about how both you operate and how the lean startup works, which is in a way, while we're still talking about how to be an author in the first place, these aren't separable phases. You worked into the exploration of whether to become an author, the beginning of building community. You know, you got your ideas by realizing what people needed more than once and then just giving it to them. And then you sort of aggregated them up into a philosophy that let me try to close this by asking you to do something that while it is uncomfortable, I think you have some practice with, which is if I were the agent bragging to their peers about how successful that first book was, what would I be saying?
Gosh, what would you be saying? I mean, I guess from the publishing industry point of view, what matters is the book has sold, I don't know, must be 2 million copies by now, which sounds like a lot, and it is. But the thing you understand about publishing is it's a celebrity-driven tournament system. So like, there's people that sell 2 million books a year.
Sure. That makes you a very good business author in terms of success.
Yeah.
Not the best author of the decade or the year. I mean, look, because the reality is there's a certain kind of writer, especially in the business world, who develops enough freedom of time, enough connections, and enough confidence in their own fucking opinions that they write a book. And sometimes they have a ghostwriter, which, you know, sometimes they don't. But the book, it's like, we can all tell. It's just for your vanity. It's like, wow, you spent a bunch of money.
Exactly.
And, you know, there are clues and stuff like that. But this wasn't that. This was a success in and of itself.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the idea development part of it and like choosing what to write about as a book. You had these talk length ideas. You had blog post length ideas. Even the thing that became the lean startup, it sounds like it was 3 paragraphs. You were already tweeting. So some things are tweet length ideas. And I guess the question is, what made this book worthy versus more fitting? Like, why didn't you stop at just a talk for this?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So that I also know exactly when I decided that or how I decided that. After I met Tim Ferriss, I was like, I want to understand publishing. I think a lot of authors skip this step, which for me, I don't understand how you could possibly go into it without doing this. To me, this is like an essential part of the process, which is like, what is publishing? I knew the economics of venture very well.
The economics of publishing are pretty similar.
Well, that was a big advantage as it turned out, but I didn't know that. I was like, what is this thing? I don't understand it. So I was like, until I understand it, I'm not doing it.
Yeah. I used to teach for years. Let me just say, I used to teach at Berkeley in the business school, this course on topics in the media industry. And the thing I point out is that there are some businesses that are built on the steady provision of a service. It's a subscription business. And there are some
Totally.
businesses that are hits driven. Movies are a hit driven business. Books are a hit driven business, and venture is a hit
Yeah,
driven
venture,
business.
of course. So I was like, I'm going to understand publishing and what it's for. What is the role of books in society? What are the economics of publishing? And again, Tim was such a useful resource at this period because he really conceived it as an apparatus that you use to serve your own purposes. So I think I was a big advantage of mine. A lot of authors go into any gatekeeper situation and you feel like you owe the gatekeeper something. You need their approval, whatever. You exist to serve them. And he was just like,
he's like, they're a service provider to you.
yeah. Tim has like so much charisma and so much self-confidence that like just the secondary reflection, the secondhand smoke of the confidence that he had was enough to get me through this whole thing. Like I don't have close to the confidence that he has.
I think that is also a remarkable insight because the people who tend to get attention for their advice being worth listening to tend to be people whose personality is inherently, there's something like boastful or charismatic in a traditional sense, can command the room. And Tim, his confidence comes from being very matter of fact and saying the thing where you're like, oh shit, yeah, I guess that is the case. And so, I guess what I love about it is the awareness that you don't have to look the part in order to be able to persuade in this way. And so he's infecting you with this confidence.
Yeah, he made me feel like I could do things that I didn't even have the confidence to think that I could do it myself. Which he hardly. I mean, we're not that close. He hardly knew me. It was actually like a remarkably generous thing of him to do. So I had to make a decision. I was like, I'm doing this research. I'm coming to understand it. And I was like, look, I have to decide to either do this or not do it. The reasons not to do it were very clear. It's going to be like a multi-year project. It's going to be really painful and annoying. It has low probability of success, blah, 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 blah. But like the reason to do it, what's the reason to? It was the same for me as that why with the talk. I was like, okay, why do it? And I realized at a certain point that I was noticing how many of our ideas as a movement now, not about me, but the ideas in the movement, because there were other people writing in this movement too. Like Sean and Dave McClure had joined the bandwagon, and obviously Steve Blank is the OG.
Yeah, for folks who don't know Steve Blank, the book is what's called 4 Steps to the Epiphany.
Yeah, 4 Steps to the Epiphany.
And it's basically about how before building the thing and guessing at what the customer wants, maybe you should just go ask them.
Yeah, he called it customer development. So it's like he and I were actually very complementary figures, and he was a great mentor of mine. So grateful to him too.
You're in this small community of makers, which, by the way, is also a common thing I've heard from a lot of other writers, is how they have this little like cabal of writing buddies.
Yeah, so helpful to not be alone in this. I had this realization that the word is spreading among engineers and tech people and founders, but we're hitting a glass ceiling. Because if you want to take the idea to your boss, you can't hand him a blog post.
Credibility. It needs to be wrapped in a book.
I just was like, there is a book-sized hole in the transmission mechanism here.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I used to think of that dynamic, which I used to be a management consultant. There was like, well, if McKinsey says it, I used to think of that dynamic in books as kind of dumb. Like, shouldn't it really be about the quality of the idea? And the more I think about it, I actually think it does embed some real wisdom in it, in the sense that by the time something is a book, it has gone through many tests, some of which are silly, but some of which are profound. The person is willing to stake their reputation on it much more. There's a whole system of professionals willing to say this is worth talking about. And then, of course, it ends up like having all of this, what's the opposite of baggage? It's like legacy benefit of like people believe books are more sensible. So, which is a long-winded way of saying it sounds silly, but I get it.
Yeah, it actually, like, it made a certain amount of sense. In those days, I was also like, I wasn't so judgmental about it. I was more just like, teach me how this works. I want to understand what it is so I can decide if it's for me. And I think that attitude actually served me very well, because I would just, if I would meet an editor, I would say, who are the top 3 agents? If I would meet an agent, I would say, who are the top 3 editors? Everybody I met, I'd be like, who's the best at this? I don't want to talk to the people who are mediocre. I want to talk to the best people.
Love that.
And I had this realization that if I wrote a book about this, we could help the ideas cross the chasm. It could be the kind of thing that you could hand to your VC and say, you should read this. This is what we really believe. And we could give vocabulary to concepts that were unnameable.
And so you're talking about impact, that the motivation for going to book was that there was demand for it to be a book and that it could have impact, as opposed to well, I just couldn't express this stuff in just a talk.
No, yeah, I absolutely, definitely 100% could have.
Yeah. And look, and there have been some bad books that then do that. And it's like, okay, I get it. This is just a blog post with some other pages.
Yeah, with AI, you see this so much worse.
Oh my God, the slop.
I want to develop a nutrition label for content. Because like I use AI in my writing. Using AI for writing is good. It's perfectly fine. What's bad is when you take 3 bullet points and say, make me a 20-page memo out of this.
Yeah, there's something about the information compression or not. It's like if I only gave it 5 words, there's going to be 5 words worth
of content in there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but for your nutrition label, I'd like to make a request, which is, you know how in a nutrition label, the lead thing is calories, of how many calories.
Yeah.
So you know how if you go on some blogging sites, Medium, et cetera, it says how many minutes it takes to read.
Oh, you're going to say how many minutes it took to write.
That's it.
That's a great idea.
Because that is a sign of I bled into this page. Therefore,
totally. Oh
you can,
my God.
by the way, it's not necessarily good or bad for it to be low or high calories, the same as a nutrition label.
Totally.
It's a deeply informative fact. And so as you're going around though and collecting this wisdom, like that's cool that you had the access to be able to do that. Yeah. Not every aspiring writer is going to be able to do that. Many of them, like I remember I read Strunk and White, and like my son will tell you, my favorite sentence in the English language is omit needless words. I remember there's the Stephen King book about writing, which I thought,
really good.
You know, Annie Lamott, like there's a bunch of these works, some books and some otherwise. Are there things that helped you along that journey that you recommend to others?
Okay.
Give me.
In prep for this meeting, my wife and I have a shelf.
Oh, because she's a writer too. I forgot about that.
Yeah, she wrote a great book called Playing Big.
Got it.
I just grabbed, this is literally our books about writing section from our shelf.
Amazing.
Which ironically does not have my favorite writing books in it. I was like looking, I was like, wait a minute. I think all the books I really, really like, I've loaned out to people. And I don't actually have them in the house
by
anymore.
the way, I have a secret on that too, which is I've got, let me grab it. Props wise, you got your props, I got mine.
I got my props, yeah.
I've got a book plate because I loan out books often enough that I'm like, maybe they'll never come back. Sometimes I put, and it just has like family name and address and a Hamilton quote on it. But sometimes I even go and stick in the book library card pouches from library books. Oh, and I'll put in a library card in that because I want it, not because I need it back, but I kind of, there's something comforting about it goes out into the universe and at least the book knows where it belongs, you know?
Oh, well, that's really funny. Okay. I think my very favorite is Bird by Anne Lamott, that's the best.
Totally.
The concept of the shitty first draft, there's a certain humility and, you know, sadness that goes into writing that if you're not braced for, first time it hits you is like, it's grim. And so just to have somebody really great who's like, the nice thing about people who are successful authors who write about writing is they're good writers, you know? So like these books are all really wonderful. I asked my wife what her favorite is. Elizabeth Gilbert book, Big Magic. These Annie Dillard books are just incredible.
A stack.
The Inner Game of Tennis. It's not even really about writing, but I think is super important for this. What is far more important than reading these kinds of books is to just read good writing.
It's a great tip.
And train yourself on it. Like you're like the neural net needs to be trained on quality stuff. If you read a lot and you write regularly, you will start to notice how your prose starts to sound like whoever you read most recently. Little quirks of that person's personality will start to show up in the way that I write. And it's like, it's super fun. And especially when you work on a book for a long time, I can detect influences like that where I'm like, oh, I was in that kind of mood because I was reading that kind of thing at the time.
I love that tip. So it's sort of like that suggests if you want to write a certain way, prime yourself by reading the thing that is written in the way that you would like to write.
And I brought these books out because so much of writing, I think this is true for any creative profession, you are synthesizing, even unconsciously, stuff that you've taken in over many years. So it's like a life pursuit. You have to trust that when the time comes, all that those 10,000 hours will turn out to be really useful. Like when I was in the moment of writing Lean Startup, there was no time for this. I was in it. It became a 24/7 obsession. I didn't have time to practice my craft. I'm on the field.
Here's an analogy, and I want to see if it holds for you. An LLM, a large language model, has to be trained on all this content.
True.
And then by the time it's doing its inference, its production of the response to a prompt, it's too late for it to develop new big influences. Obviously, you can pass it in, but it's almost like you were trained on all these prior life experiences and the things you read and being fortunate to have a childhood where your parents encouraged you to write and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally.
And then you're on the field.
It's very much like that. And like you hear athletes talk about this all the time. You go in the zone and you trust in the reps.
Yeah.
that you've done before. And I really
Yeah.
feel like it's like that. And writing and reading are not separate activities. So the reps are all the things you've ever read, like, and not just read casually, like the time you have to learn close reading. You have to learn to read attentively. You have to learn to be alive while you're reading. We talk about reading for escape. Like, who are you escaping from? You're escaping from yourself. You're not there. That's why so
Yeah.
many books you can't remember what happens. When you learn to read in a
Fascinating.
present way, like as you mature in your ability to do this, you're able to immerse yourself in the thing, but then you're also able to notice what's going on at the same time. Interestingly, well, I'm sure we'll come back to this. LLMs are an incredible tool for close reading. People are sleeping on that as a skill, because if you talk to, like, I know I'm a like complete amateur. Even in my house, I'm not even the best writer in my own house, let alone like if you have academic people around, it's like, they're like, oh, please, your level of erudition is nothing. But like for people who are really, people who've got like a PhD in literature, when they do close reading.
And just, I think I know what you mean by close reading, but what do you mean?
Yeah. So when someone like that reads a piece of text, they have this immense amount of context to understand what's going on. So like you read a sentence and you're like, this is a reference to a biblical passage. This is actually like subtly a dig at this other writer.
I mean, it's like music fans listening to something and being like, that lyric is actually because she had beef with her.
100%. Beef's going back millennia we're talking about here. And it's like, yeah, Thomas Aquinas wrote this thing. And if you pay really close attention to well-crafted writing, you will find this richness to it. And you see this, in poetry too. Like I remember I used to feel like how silly it was in poetry that like what words happen to rhyme determines what you can say as a poet. And then as you get older, you realize, no, that's what's incredible about it, is like the ability to craft the whole poem in such a way that it interlocks at all these different levels, and it is there. So there's like a depth to writing that you can learn to access.
But so then you're on the field, and what I hear from many authors is they spend a lot of time and effort trying to figure out, of those many levels, sort of like, what's the top level, for lack of a better way of putting it? What's my one idea here? What's the architecture of it?
No, totally.
You sort of did that work in the talk that you prepared for the Lean Startup.
And not just in that talk, but in the hundreds of talks.
And refining it and continue to iterate on it.
And I'm very grateful for that. Like when I say the book took 2 years to produce end to end, a lot of that time I am workshopping ideas from the book, whether I knew it or not.
Totally. Was that different for the subsequent books in terms of picking, like if you had to pick what you were writing about? Here, I'll give you examples of trade-offs that I hear about from writers. Art versus commerce, what you believe versus what the market wants to buy. Simplicity versus complexity. Scope. How big is this book versus small? And you had other books like, Startup Way, and you had like, companion guides and stuff like that, even before we'll get to Incorruptible. Tell us about the idea selection, sizing, and layering and all that.
I was very lucky with Lean Startup that I had the thesis from the start. So books require a distillation. That's the word I would use for it. A distillation of a life's experience into some crystalline fragment that like coheres as like the kernel of what the thing is. And because I had been searching for that in my life for years and years and years with Lean Startup, I already had it. I came into the fight with it. Remember I said that Lean Startup wasn't my first metaphor that I had tried? The biggest thing I see, you see this in startups too, and writers both, most of us don't know what success looks like unless we have something to contrast it to. So the first time people got Lean Startup, the only reason I could notice that and realize, because it wasn't like, I'm trying to give you a sense of how long it took to become a thing in the world.
Yeah.
But I knew it was a thing way before anybody else, because I had tried to explain everything in Lean Startup. I used to try to explain it. For example, one of them I remember was as the organelles of a cell biology as the main metaphor. And you had the outer membrane and the nucleus and the whatever. And if you've ever tried to explain a conceptual metaphor like that to someone and have them just look at you like, what the, right? Like zero comprehension whatsoever. And you're like, it's like a stand-up comic dying on stage. So like, I've had that experience. When you've had that experience, when people yell at you, you're like, this is an upgrade.
Because at least they're paying attention.
I have hit a nerve. There's something here. And when people start to be like, oh, that's interesting.
So meaning, because you had enough traffic of back and forth in dialogue and ideas with people, you had a live proving ground for sharpening and see what stuff just didn't land at all.
What works. You hear the same thing in bands who like the Beatles, famously playing dive bars all those years, or you hear it from stand-up comics, like just the practice of going out there and doing the same set every night, no matter how badly it goes, to like figure out what lands. Yeah, you get to try stuff. So many of the key ideas, I can remember where I was the first time I tried it with someone, or the time I tried to write it on a whiteboard and explain it. And these trade-offs of simplicity versus complexity, scope, all that stuff is like, the problem with writing is you get in your head and you're like, it's easy to just, you get lost for months or years. The advantage of trying to use the concept for a thing is that if it's not working, you find out right away. Like I can remember, I thought that Lean Startup, I used to have this master diagram that tried to show how all of what I call the engines of growth, the different ways that a startup can grow, a product can grow really, are deeply interrelated through a series of metrics and feedback loops and whatever. And it was just like, crazy. And I was like, I figured it out. I've had the epiphany. I felt like Doc Brown, and I've seen the flux capacitor.
So it's almost like you need those moments. Like if you were a comedian, you would need the moment of not even the bomb of like something being bad, of just the non-response to know what not to try. And you're describing writing as a social activity, not a solitary.
It's 100% a social activity because meaning is socially constructed. So
yeah,
that's how it is.
Damn.
But you still spend a lot of time in a freaking cave. Okay. So both things are true. But I can remember I would go into these startups and I would like lay out that, like, here's the diagram. From this diagram, I can answer any question you have. And your startup is now completely comprehensible to me. And people would just be like, huh? Nobody got it. I'm like, okay, this is too complicated. And a lot of concepts in the Lean Startup are actually further distillations where I was like, okay, this is too complicated. But if I slice off this pizza slice of it and give that a name, that is comprehensible to people.
And to what extent, I mean, let's just take Incorruptible, the current one.
Yeah.
I guess I could tell the story that was just the outgrowth of the continued workshopping on the design of companies. I mean, for folks who have yet to read the book, the idea that you can design a company so that it stays true to the intention to do something, to do good, or to do something that its creators originally had. Was that effectively the same process of coming to that book? Or how is it the same and how is it different?
The part that's the same is just, I call it the hand-to-hand combat phase. For me, there's a huge part of this, which is just you understand something well enough to talk to people about it and try to get them to do the thing. That's the stand-up comic. Like, you're just every day for years and years. This was my like weird hobby. Some people collect butterfly wings and some people collect marbles or whatever, baseball cards. I collected like weird corporate governance ideas. If someone would tell me a story, like I can still remember, I met a former SEC high-level staffer, like a really like successful corporate lawyer. And I was kind of talking about LTSE and the different stuff that I'm interested in, long-term thinking. He's like, well, it sounds a lot like the Alibaba voting trust. And I'm like, never heard of that. What's that?
I love this. You leaned into the interests you had that you knew were uncommon in there too. It's almost like, I started getting really into the idea. Actually, I think this is around the time we first met, around learning to code being a thing that everybody ought to do, even though I am quarter technical. And it was fucking weird at the time, but I knew there weren't, right now I'm into labor organizing. There's not that many people who do what I do who are into labor organizing. And so part of it for me is showing up for my own interests, being indifferent to my own oddity. Let's put it that way.
Totally. And you can't spend too much of your time handicapping the probability of success of things. Because it's not your business. You don't know. Like what's going to turn out, that obviously if you've never heard the famous Steve Jobs speech about calligraphy, like he talks about all these weird hobbies he had as a child and as a college student. I think the one that sticks with me anyway is he talks about he like spent a absurd amount of time going deep on calligraphy for no reason. But then like later it allowed him to invent fonts.
I love that.
Right? Like, so it turned out to be immensely useful later in a way that was impossible to predict or forecast.
Yeah, but you're collecting these governance oddities.
Yeah, weird stuff. Now, the really important difference is I went into Lean Startup with a title and a thesis. Like that is so useful to begin with that. With Incorruptible, I didn't have that. This book was called Untitled on Governance for a really long time.
Fascinating.
My poor publisher, how awful. And it took me a really long time to come up with the title and then to come up with the thesis. This book, I still remember when I had my agent read a draft. I was like, how do you like it? He's like, if you want to publish this book, you can, but this is not a business book.
Interesting.
This is like a technical manual.
Okay.
What's great about a great agent is, of course, she wasn't like, you suck. She was like, is this the book you want to write? And I'm like, of course it is. It's what I've been working on for years at this point. And she was like, is it? Like, she was like, you tell me if you want to publish this book, I'll help you get this book published. But are you sure this is what you want? And I needed somebody to smack me in the face. And I was like, oh my God, this thing has grown. There's like literally a tumor that has grown in this book.
Let me just make sure I follow. Was that because of being fundamentally off in the wrong direction, or just bloat, or what was the core of the issue?
In order to get this book to this current length, I had to cut a whole other book-sized book out of it. It was literally double the length it needed to be.
So it's basically that you had not, in the distillation that you just described.
Yeah, I hadn't done the distillation yet, and I had written that book for myself.
Mm-hmm.
In order to write the book, I first was like, I need to understand every one of these concepts to the nth degree.
Got it.
But not everybody needs this level or even wants this level of detail about this. Maybe this is for a workbook or something else. And I remember I took every chapter and I split it in half. And I was like, I pretended like there was chapter 8A and chapter 8B, chapter 9A and chapter 9B. And I was like, what goes in? I changed the question from like, what do I delete to what's going in A and what's going in B. And if it's like workbooky type material, it's going in B.
Wait, does that mean we're going to have a workbook about Incorruptible at some point?
If people buy it, the workbook will follow because I have a lot of material sitting on the cutting room floor. So much material.
I love it.
So Incorruptible, the distillation came late in the process. And of course, it's much less painful if you've had it early.
Well, but hold on. I mean, when you say it's much less painful if it comes early, in a weird way, that seems like, how can you distill early? There's nothing to distill quite yet.
Well, that's why having a long preseason is so valuable because by the time you enter into the writing process, you already have conceptual clarity. But anyway, going back to Lean Startup, because it was originally basically just a series of essays, when I first signed with my agent, first got into the process and figured out how this was going to work. And even after you decide to write a business book, you then have to decide what kind of book it's going to be. Like, it's going to be a big trade press kind of book versus a niche publisher book.
What does trade press mean?
Yeah, the trade press is like the popular books that everybody reads. It's like
airport
the big published, the books you'll see in an airport, except for Harvard Business School, which also has a great airport section with that unusual. Anyway, so there's like the books that kind of like are the big mainstream books. And then you have all these niche books. So there's like, Harvard Business Press and O'Reilly and Wiley and places like that. And those books you trade. It's like you publish with them as a trade-off. Like in anything that has a more of a niche audience, you're gaining something by giving up on the mass thing. One of which is like you're giving up on the pain of the butt of dealing with traditional publishing, which is quite painful. Now you also, even at Lean Startup time, you were starting to have these hybrid presses come out. And of course, now you can self-publish on Kindle, you can self-publish on Amazon. So there's, even once you've decided to write a book, there are many, many, many paths forward. And my number one piece of advice to all authors is always just match the means to the ends. Most authors simply do not make a plan to accomplish their actual goal. And if you don't do that, I know so many people who are disappointed by what happened. But from my point of view, they didn't do the things that were necessary for what they wanted to have happen. Like once I understood the crossing the chasm element of this book, then I was like, it has to be credentialized in such a way that you can give it to your boss. Your boss says, why do I have to read this? It's like a thing you've heard of. It's been in the Wall Street Journal. It's like, it's like it needed a certain level of legitimacy. We were like borrowing legitimacy from the system.
For sure.
And in fact, I even set the goal to be a New York Times bestseller.
Oh, really? Is there anything else about how the ideas came to be conceptualized in that book-sized shape that you want to make sure to share?
So I mentioned before that my original concept was more like a series of essays, independent essays. And the reason I conceived it that way is I already had these long blog posts.
Sure.
So my agent, when I finally signed with her, she was like, look, a business book is like basically 12 5,000 word chapters. I think it's less now, actually. I think people are writing shorter and shorter books. Roughly speaking, that's our goal. And I was like, great, I've got 12 5,000 word essays, like no problem. So I was like, I kind of like, I like to do things where I feel like I've already accomplished it before I say yes to do it. I was like, oh, is this going to be great? I already have plenty of writing, so I'll be fine. And the process of going from that series of essays to a book for me was most of the work of Lean Startup. It wasn't so much having to produce 60,000 words of new material. It was about trying to figure out what is the distillation of the book. And that changed a lot. Conceiving of it as a book versus a series of essays was a big deal change for me. And I got real excited about it, actually, once I started to get into the project of it. And I think that's where having read like a zillion trillion business books was so helpful.
You're like riding the rails of what all those other books are like.
Yeah, I was like, I'm doing the same thing that Clay Christensen did.
Yeah, okay.
I'm in the same club as Peter Drucker. Like, I was like, oh, I'm not as good as them, but I'm doing the same thing. And so then I started to do stuff that I was like, it started out very clumsy. You start out aping them.
Yeah.
Peter Drucker has this like incredible ability to tell these stories that are like, I was walking in a factory in the Midwest one day when I would like start to write those kind of stories and get excited about that. And like Clay Christensen, Jeff Moore, like these classic business books, you know, they cross-reference the different chapters with each other. They've written lots of books. So he'd be like, as I wrote in my prior book, the blah, blah, blah.
And so you're emulating on that.
Yeah, I'm emulating. And it's bad. Like, this is why Bird by Bird is such the essential book. It's like, if you read those drafts, they're horrendous. They're so bad. They're pretentious. They're meandering. They're confusing. And I still wasn't clear about the reader yet. They're simultaneously like too technical and too detailed. The trade-off in writing is between generality and specificity. The more specific you make it, the more you require that the reader's life experience lines up with yours so that they can understand what you're talking about. So if I write about software, like the mechanics of making software, the book has to be read by software people. Non-software people will be like, I don't know anything about software. But if you write in general, you have to trust the reader to supply the specific details, which is extra work for the reader, which nobody wants to do. Everyone would like to have a perfectly customized book just for them. And it be the same book that everybody else reads so that it could be part of the popular culture. And until LLMs produce custom books for everybody, it's just an impossible task to achieve. So that was the big struggle for me. You know, so should we get into Kanban, software Kanban, and should we get into like test-driven development and cluster immune system and stuff like that? And for everything, your choices are don't mention it at all, have it come up kind of by coincidence in a story, mention it but don't explain it but don't give the instruction manual or like walk the reader through step by step, right? So you have this like notches you can go to. And I can remember my wife and I, she was also working on her book at the same time. We were at different stages of the process, but still both in it. We took a vacation to like, I think we went to Santa Fe, and we just stayed there and wrote all day for like a couple of weeks. And I was like, that's where we get into the like, you're just wrestling with the page.
So let's talk about writing itself.
Yeah.
Let's take Lean Startup. And you've got the talk. You've been honing the thing. You've been doing your stand-up comedy, and you know which jokes bombs and which one land. You know which sentence to inflect. How on earth did it not just fucking write itself?
Man, there are some writers like that can.
I know. I hear David Remnick is like that. I've heard Octavia Butler used to be like that.
I'm sure she was a genius. And journalists also have a version of this where like you can produce on a deadline. That to me is like a super. I feel like I'm like, you know, you watch the Olympics and they'll ask the athletes about the other sports, and the guys who do the bobsled will be like, this isn't dangerous. You know what's crazy is the guys that do ski jumping. You know, that the ski jumpers are like, this isn't crazy. The luge, now that's crazy. So I'm like, yeah, the ability to write on a deadline and produce consistent word count and have it be at all artistic is incredible to me. I don't know how that's done. Okay,
so it didn't write itself. Tell us about what it was like for you. Holed up in that temple in Santa Fe or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That was really when I had to grapple with like essays versus book. You know, like what does it really mean to write a book? And had to come to the like dismal conclusion that I wasn't nearly as close as I thought I was. The first struggle was to get to a draft where the ideas are roughly in the right order. You've put stories in the places there need to be stories. You've constructed a book-shaped thing. It has a narrative arc to it. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The cross-references that need to be there. And there's like the load-bearing. I've heard that load-bearing is an LLM word now.
When you say an LLM word, I think what you mean there is load-bearing is the kind of word like delve.
Like delve. I love M dashes and I love load-bearing, and I'm irritated to have to give them up.
They took our good shit.
Yeah.
I even like an N dash.
Love it. Oh, it's the best of the punctuations, and now it's being ruined. So I think it sucks about writing. It does have something in common with entrepreneurship, where it's like the boss of a certain level in the video game is now the Goomba in the next level. Right? So like you get to a complete draft and you're like, yes, I have done it. This is the hardest part of the book and I have completed it. And then, you know, you come back to it a couple of days later and you're like, who wrote this garbage?
Painful.
It's so painful.
How interesting is it to talk to a writer or not? Because I haven't really done this very much, but I know some people do, about call it their writing habits. How many hours a day? Do you outline first or not?
Oh my God. Some people are so disciplined about that kind of stuff and they have such a clear process. I envy those people, even that can write every day. I am not like that. I used to think that when people talk about the muse, that was like very pretentious. But I really understand what the Greeks were trying to talk about now.
What were they? What is the muse?
There are these moments where the thing pours out of you. I don't experience it as I write this thing. Like the Platonic forms or the idea that there's like something that's being channeled. I really have, that's how it feels to me. Like when you see it so clearly and it's just like, now it's time to go. And I remember most of the time I was writing the Lean Startup, I was just still living my regular life. Like I'd be meeting people and then I'd write in between. Be like, you know what? I need to block a whole day. Can't be taking meetings today. I need to focus. I need to write. And I would be like so dejected by 4 o'clock because I would have accomplished just nothing. If you had like a security cam footage of me, I would look like an animal in captivity, pacing
I've had
around.
days like that where I'll like take 2 days off and my team will like bracket time. And
I'm getting nothing done. I'm watching TV and I'm just wandering around.
Taking a nap.
Like at like 4:45, all of the sudden, I'd be like, Eureka, let's go. And I'm like pouring words out onto the page. We have a thing at 6. So I've had all day to get this done. And like, why is it pouring out of me at 5:55 when I need to leave it? So it's like, that's very inconvenient. It's very, very irregular to me. That's my process. And to me, I just spend a lot of time in the research, a lot of time with people getting feedback, like trying things out. To me, it's a very active.
Well, but hold on, but let's just talk about in
Yeah.
the research. So I've been trying to write something long form.
Yeah.
And I've found the research time, it's not easy. Nothing's easy. But it flows more natural for me because it looks like my regular job. I set up a meeting with someone and I talk to them and I've got an outline of what I want to talk to them about. And then I get to the writing and nothing is making anything happen.
It's very difficult. It's a puzzle. For every story you read in one of my books, there's at least 10 other stories that I researched to that same level of detail that didn't make it.
So meaning that's a distillation as well, is what I hear you saying. And I guess the implication in that is don't blame yourself if you end up dropping a lot of stuff. Did that selection help you move forward? Like, it seems like that could be paralyzing as much as anything else.
It is. It can be. No, you have to have the database. You have to have the material to draw on. And I would often get to situations where I would be like, I'm stuck because I'm trying to teach something and I don't know it well enough. Like I need to pause and I need a story of this time. Like you eventually, when you get close enough to the end, you start to be able to say, I have an IGN shaped hole in my narrative and I need to spend some time with big companies. And I need to get something like this. But at the beginning, you can't do that. So in the beginning, you're just amassing the information you think will be useful.
So, but if the default state is a state of being stuck and not writing, I guess what I hear is back on serendipity is that the thing is just await the muse.
The hard part about this is you can't wait. That's not my experience. You have to be busy. You have to be doing stuff. And if you can't write, then you figure out other things you can do that are adjacent to the thing you need to do.
So meaning research another story or go read something.
Definitely for me, it was meet with companies and like try ideas out on them. Academic research. Like I pulled a lot of academic research for it. I'm making this sound more official than it is. Like I did do some stuff that was like me in a library, doing research. But a lot of times I would just be like on Twitter or like reading the news. Like if you look at chapter 1 of Lean Startup, I'm sure I can find this. There's like a graph in here. Like people forget Lean Startup starts with this work of economic theory before we get into any like cool startup-y stuff. This graph is from somebody's blog post. You gotta see yourself as a collector of potentially useful ingredients. Like you're building a bakery and you don't know what you're gonna bake yet.
I love that.
I think here's the hard part about what I've just said. The difference between what I just described and being distracted and procrastinating is paper thin. I would have a day where I took the day off, faffed around all day, and then like by the end of the day had a really great writing breakthrough. Then I'd be like, okay, I guess I'm doing something right. And if I actually am like, oh, wow, I spent the whole day arguing on Twitter and accomplishing nothing, I would start to be like, But I was still blogging. So I was getting feedback in other ways.
Wait, sorry. So while you were writing Lean Startup, the book, you were also blogging and tweeting clearly. How did you know how to do the time and effort balance of I'm writing this thing that's not in the book and not for the book and just different? Man, I have precious limited time to write.
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound organized because it was very organic.
No, I appreciate that. I'm more asking in the organic flow of it, and I appreciate the humility of acknowledging what it was like. Were there moments where you knew I bounced into the gutter here and I got to bounce back out?
Yeah, exactly. You basically try to focus on. I mean, I think once I committed to write the book and I had like a deadline, then I was like, okay, I have like a year to produce this manuscript. I need to make sure I'm making steady progress.
Okay. So meaning that one of the threshold moments was the commitment to deliver by a certain date.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what I didn't know at the time was that I was the only person involved in this project who thought that date was a meaningful event. Nobody else seemed to have the slightest expectation that I would in fact deliver a manuscript on that date.
Did you?
Well, I got to like the end of the year, 12/31 or something. And I remember I got to like Thanksgiving time, and I'd been sending drafts to my editor and not hearing anything back. And I was like, oh my God, he hates it. They're going to cancel my contract. It's like I'm getting nothing from him at all. We're getting closer and closer to the deadline. I'm like, now we're starting to become more and more and more of a problem. What's going on? And I remember like I was like chasing him down to be like, did you get the stuff I sent you? Like, what's going on? And at a certain point he was like, oh yeah, I saw you sent me some stuff. I'll get to it eventually. Like, no stress. Like, I'm like, no stress. I'm insanely stressed over here. I can't even like relax over my Thanksgiving vacation here. Like, and I'm like, don't we have to like get this thing done by 12/31? It's like very late in the process. He's like, oh, it's okay. We could take till February or whatever you need. Like, don't stress it. And I'm like, I'm very stressed of it. I'm trying to get it done. So I did deliver him a complete draft on time, but I don't know that he even read it because it was like, for his point of view, it was premature.
I think there's something about the power of a deadline. The funny thing is, depending on one's psychology, I'll speak to my own.
Yeah.
Fake deadlines don't work on me, but being accountable to another human being, it's like, hey, we're working on this memo. We need your comments by Thursday night. All of a sudden, I'm like, I got to fucking do it by Thursday night. And again, I don't want to pretend 100% delivery, but the psychological effect of owing something to another person. And, by converse, the worst thing somebody can do for me in doing anything, they think they're being kind to me, is they say, no rush.
No rush. Yeah.
I'm like, great. No rush means will never
happen. Yeah.
We'll talk in a few months, And so it sounds like you didn't have a pair programmer. There was no ghostwriter.
No.
There was no co-writer.
My agent's my closest collaborator, over the long term. And people who don't have that relationship with their agent, I pity them. Like I feel so lucky that I've been able to have the same agent this whole time, and she's really terrific. She was the gatekeeper. She was like, look, she took me on as a client on the basis of like a couple scribbled pages of like, here's what I want to do. And she could see that it was going to work.
Well, but hold on. It wasn't just on the basis of a couple scribbled pages, because you already had...
I had a platform and I had some, and she could see my writing, but it wasn't like I didn't have a full proposal or anything. I sent her like, here's a summary.
Yeah, of course. But with respect to this work, as you evolved from one draft to the next,
yeah, sure.
how much did the process change for you?
It's so different. There's a book to be written just about this because I feel like I really had a hard time with this. The subjective experience of each of the stages of writing is so different. They're almost unrecognizable jobs. It's like being promoted to a new job and no one told you.
Huh.
So like there's the trying to figure out how to get to a first draft. Like, what is this book about? What is the outline? What are the chapters? Like, just what the F is it really?
It's interesting because you're not really describing the typing of the words. You're describing structure, chapter architecture, how much overlap between chapters versus
just
not.
What is, just like, honestly, what is it? Mm-hmm. And then you have the rush of writing the first draft. When you finally clear the obstacles, like what I did for Lean Startup, I couldn't write chapter 1. I just couldn't do it. And I've had this insight where I was like, I don't work for someone else. I can write whatever I want. I'm my own boss. Like Nate Silver, I think, is the one who said the worst part of working for yourself is you hate your boss.
Uh-huh.
I was like, I'm going to start with chapter 8 or whatever it was. I don't remember now. I started in the middle. I wrote straight through from the middle to the end.
And then you came back.
And then I came back and I went back to chapter 1 and I wrote from chapter 1 to chapter 8. I did it.
Amazing.
Like that. That was the order I happened to write it in.
What were on any of the books, what were the hard choices or moments or dilemmas around the structure?
So if you look at the outline of all three of the like big books that I've written.
So you had outlines for all three of the books?
Yeah, because I had done some kind of outline for the proposal. Yes, they all had some level of outline, and I've always used this 3-part structure.
I mean, you and the ancients.
Yeah, I tend to naturally settle into an introduction, 3 parts, and an epilogue. All of my books have that exact structure.
One of the books that influenced me about writing is the book Story. Sure, and it's about Hollywood screenwriting for folks who don't know it.
Yeah.
And what you start to realize is how ancient some of these technologies are.
Yeah.
That like the structure you just described has probably been in human performances for literally millennia.
For a long
So maybe
long
that's
time.
why you were
Maybe that's why I was drawn to it. Hey, for whatever reason. So you get into the rush of it. And it's incredible. It's just so fun when you finally feel like you're rolling the boulder downhill and you're going. And my genre is, generally speaking, each chapter is a concept illustrated by a story with some research, some kind of like framework or abstraction derived from that, and then maybe additional stories as proof points or some kind of forward-looking bit of inspiration to carry you on to the next concept. So like for me to write a book is to do like between 10 and 15 of those things.
One of the things that comes out of some of your work, specifically the Lean Startup, but there's other stuff too, is a name of an idea. Like the MVP, the pivot. People, for those who do not know, when you talk about pivoting, this is the guy who fucked up all our language by making us talk about pivots.
That's me.
But I guess what I'm asking is the structure you just described of like an abstract concept, a story, it's not centering around an idea, a name of a thing. Yet those are some of the things that feel most resonant about your work and by many other works too.
The phrase I use for it is conceptual vocabulary.
Okay.
That is the coinage of a phrase or a concept. And it's actually not about the word choice. People really fixate on the word choice, which matters. That's like the packaging. But the real question is like, does this idea crystallize for people something that's like in the ether that they've either thought about or experienced, but now it has a name? It's the official name of this thing. And for example, for pivot, I didn't even know I was doing this. I do this naturally, but I didn't know it was like a thing. But I always admired the people that do it. Crossing the Chasm, Disruptive Innovation. Like I love those books. I love the concepts that were delivered.
Totally.
And I can remember because of Lean Startup success, I was invited. There was the friends of a lawyer who was like an OG Silicon Valley lawyer. He had worked on the big, famous old school companies. Like he'd worked on the Microsoft IPO and the Google IPO and stuff like that. He had passed away, and some of his friends were trying to get his memoirs published. He had written a bunch of essays. And they had asked me, because I was now a like successful Silicon Valley author, would I just read the manuscript and give them some feedback? And I was so moved that they would choose to do this. Like I felt like I was given this like glimpse into Silicon Valley history. And I almost bust out laughing because he's trying to explain to a lay audience what the whole Silicon Valley thing is all about. At a time, this is from a very idealistic time in Silicon Valley, not like it is today. And he's trying to explain these guys, and he's like, these entrepreneurs have this incredible ability to like stick with an idea no matter what. But they're also super flexible and they like fix things when they're not working. But they're also have tremendous perseverance and they never give up. And he's like, you can see him trying to explain this thing that like happens in all these, like it happened at Microsoft, it happened at Google, it happened at all these companies you've heard of. They all have this common arc in this thing. And he's describing each story. Each time he wants to tell a story, he has to explain the concept again in the context of that story. So these stories are all twice as long as they need to be because half the story is trying to explain the pivot without the word pivot. And not the word pivot, the concept, the idea that this is a repeatable thing that happens is missing from this manuscript because Silicon Valley didn't have it before. We didn't talk about this. I remember a good friend of mine now, I won't embarrass him by saying his name, but like he called me. I was like giving him this advice to talk to customers and whatever. And he was like, dude, I'm getting really frustrated with you. Just tell me one famous company that did this, okay? Just one. And I was like, name one that didn't. And he was like, blah, blah, blah. I was like, nope, buddy. You name a company, I'll tell you its pivot story. And when I did that, he was like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. So it's something we knew, but we didn't know that we knew it.
There have been many companies that I think of as Lean Startup inspired. But the number of companies that carry in their proactive identity, that becomes a choice for them in how they want to be known.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's like a marketing question about whether you want that in one of your brand attributes or not.
Exactly. And so like sometimes people love to say, and then we had a pivot. And sometimes I've noticed actually founders, when they want to share that they're planning to change their focus, sometimes it'll be like, but trust me, this isn't a pivot, as they like drop out of consumer and go B2B. Or sometimes it's like, we're going to hard pivot. And it's like, motherfucker, you added a feature. That is not a pivot.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a huge problem because that's why I use the phrase conceptual vocabulary. These are not consumer-facing terms. In fact, if people are using MVP, pivot, and they're like external marketing, even to investors, I'm often very suspicious. Like it's a useful concept for you to understand what's happening. You have to decide how to communicate it in a way that makes sense for your situation. Now, if you're talking to investors you trust and you're in a boardroom, of course, we're going to use that language because that's our technical language that we use in the business. But when you're out there marketing yourself, when you're out there trying to get attention to people, every once in a while there's a startup that really like goes big on how like lean startup is their thing, but it's very rare, especially now that it's older. Much more likely is like I'll meet a founder who's made $1 gazillion and they'll be like, oh man, lean startup was like the essential thing that allowed us to have this incredible success. And I'll be like, could you tell somebody else too? Like, because people will be like, oh, lean startups, it's all over. And I'm like, well, this guy thinks it's pretty good.
Well, and I guess that gets to, with respect to being a writer, is one of the things about a book is it has a date. And not all writing has a date. I mean, for example, our website doesn't have a date.
Oh, yeah, because you can revise it whenever you want. Oh, God, yeah.
Well, both because we can revise it and because the way in which it's consumed, just how we think about it, the date on which the thing is written is not a very important fact, or it's a fact, but not.
Exactly.
Whereas a book, it's literally in the first few pages. It's a thing we know. And so how do you think about how evergreen versus immediately relevant a book needs to be? Like, how does the staying power of the thing figure for you as a writer?
That's also a version of that specificity versus generality trade-off.
Right, because it could be specific to the moment, and then it may be irrelevant.
And listen, there's people that crank books out every year.
Yeah.
Some fiction writers can do multiple books a year, which is incredible to me. So if you're writing more frequently, you can be much more responsive to the moment. And you understand at a certain level that when you're cranking out hundreds of books, they're basically disposable. They're consumables. And you'll be remembered as an artist for your body of work in general, rather than most likely for these individual works that you haven't put that much time and energy into. On the flip side, you have people that labor for many, many years to produce a magnum opus. And it's like, this is the definitive work on this thing. So like you always have this trade-off. I wanted to write something that people would feel was contemporary and culturally relevant to this moment and would have legs and be an enduring contribution.
So you wanted to do both?
I wanted to find that sweet spot in the middle.
Wouldn't everyone want to do both?
If everyone, no, I don't think that's necessarily true because.
Good point.
Yeah, like Lean Startup came out in 2011. It's now 2026. Depending on how you count, I've written 3 or 4 books total in that span. So that's not a lot of output. There's this phase in between the complete first draft and when you're ready to be edited. Okay. This is my experience. I can't speak for anybody else, but this is my experience.
Of course, this is not advice. We know.
You are no longer writing in the sense of I have a blank page. Let me write a whole new chapter.
Right.
So you're technically revising, but you're not just like polishing. You're reading this piece of crap and being like, this chapter does not work. This story sucks.
So it's more like rewriting. I'll just use the word literally.
It's like you're rewriting.
As opposed to editing.
To liken it to the startup experience for a second. It's like the kinds of experiments you do that lead up to a pivot. You're trying to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So you do everything possible to make it work. And if you truly exhaust everything you can think of, and then you're like, this structure isn't right. Oh no. This chapter is actually 2 chapters, or this chapter has to be cut. It's just not there. It's not right. So, and it's in this phase where you can start to get test readers or feedback.
Mm-hmm.
But now you have a new problem, which is that when we call it the shitty first draft for a reason, to you, it's amazing, but it's actually basically unreadable still. I remember you gave me great feedback on Incorruptible at a certain phase. You were like, some of these chapters feel formulaic. Like you're repeating the pattern.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, right. You are at some level writing to a formula, like what you do to get it to go. And then you're like, oh, that's no good. You've been so focused on each chapter as an individual work, but they're not. This is one book. So they have to relate to each other. You can't repeat yourself. You can't repeat yourself in structure. You can't repeat yourself in story. You can't repeat yourself in type of protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're like, I've got 3 amazing stories that in isolation are great, but they're too similar.
Yeah. I guess what I hear is this process of like zooming out and back in.
Totally. It's macro, micro all the time.
Also, you are repeating yourself on some level because things have beginnings, middles, and ends, but you're also varying the themes.
Totally. And I think a lot about the emotional arc of each story, each chapter, each part, and the overall book.
Emotional arc means what?
Means the emotional experience of the reader.
How you feel during the different elements.
And look, this is business writing, so doesn't need to be, 50 Shades of Grey, right? Like it doesn't have to be explosive and dramatic and whatever. But at the end of the day, the reader's morale is a scarce resource.
Right. The way I put it is like each page has to sell you on continuing to the next page.
Yeah, you have to, at some level, the reader has to choose to continue. It's they get the final say, as I write at the end of Incorruptible. So like they get to decide to go to the next page. So that means we have to balance, like a painter, darkness and light. If every story is depressing, you're like, why am I reading this book?
No, I mean, I get the pacing thing there. I mean, narrative pacing, I guess.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not actually that every page has to sell the next page. The first page has to sell the second page. But by the time you've built up enough trust with the reader,
hopefully, right? So you're trying to figure out like, where are we? And it's like you're like dating, basically. Like the introduction of a book has to be like very fireworks and exciting, because I got to get you to just commit to read this book. I always write the introduction at the end. So my books always have a horrible introduction until I completely rewrite it at the end of the process. Because until you've written the whole book, you don't even know what the book is about. So you can't write the introduction. That's the other really frustrating part. Everything's a really frustrating part. So you write the introduction and you're like, aha, look how attractive I am, look how great I am, and whatever. And it's like, okay, now we're going to sit down and like try to do this thing. And you're doing this dance with the reader. I need to give you value. Okay. So like, I can't be asking you to do work if I haven't proven to you that work is valuable, like it's going to pay off. So I got to give you value right away. I have to create mystery or intrigue or curiosity about what's to come. And I have to promise you what you're going to get without telling you what it is, which is really difficult.
Totally.
So, because like most things, especially when we're talking about conceptual vocabulary, to name the thing is to have done the work of telling you what it is. So a lot of my writing, if you look at these early drafts, I'll be like, coming up next, then a giant, incredibly detailed description of what's coming up next that is actually just
what was next. That was
it's just what was next. And then I'm like, oh God. So like, I'm really proud of Incorruptible, how it's structured and how it's paced. Like I really got a lot of feedback and really spent a lot of time dialing it in from a craft perspective, because it was much more difficult than Lean Startup. And I was really very focused on like, what is that jumping off point where we end a chapter and take to the next chapter?
Yeah.
Most of the book is structured with a zooming out metaphor. We start with the innermost intention of a company, the thing you most control. And then we add layers and layers and layers. If you know the Ames documentary of Powers of 10?
Yeah, of course.
So that was the image I had in my mind.
Oh, that's so cool.
Of like, we're zooming out and we start with the microcosm and we go to the universe.
Yeah, one of the cool things I love about that documentary is when it goes back in.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, well, no spoilers.
For sure.
No, but that was absolutely my conception of the book.
Well, but that, by the way, is a difference between this kind of story as you write it and, let's say, a fiction story. In a fiction story, no spoilers. But actually, a book like a nonfiction book typically is, it's about the layering of all the spoilers.
It's all spoilers.
Although maybe foreshadowing is that version of spoil. I don't know. Maybe it's less different than we think.
The reason I find fiction writing so much more difficult is like, I at least have to be tethered to reality periodically.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when I'm writing, where I'm like, I want to make this claim or I want to go here. And in my research process, I'll often have a chapter where I'm just like, I want to boldly claim that this is true. And I like have a note to myself, go find out if this is true.
Right.
Or like, I'll tell a story sometimes the way that I wish it was in reality. And then I have like a note to myself, like, make sure you go find out if this is what really happened. To me, that actually like helps me not have to feel like I could go in any possible direction.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mentioned the zooming out thing because the problem with that structure, like from a writing craft perspective, is the first draft of this book, every chapter ended the same way. It was like, good news, I've taught you this incredibly useful thing. Bad news, it's completely useless because now this other thing that's even more important. And I didn't realize I had been doing that until I had test readers read this thing. And there was like, this is very dispiriting to feel like what I learned was useless in the face of this new problem that you never told me about before. I had to write a custom bridge for every chapter. Some chapters were easy.
It's funny, as I think about it, the reader in me tunes out when I think there's like the key takeaways at the end of in every business book. It's like, has anybody ever read those key takeaways?
I don't even like reflection questions, although the test readers love reflection questions.
Really?
So maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, so, okay, but let's talk about the test readers though for a second. And I know we're kind of alternating between the phases and the elements that come up. The general question is, when do you get the opinions of other people? With Incorruptible, I've been a reader for other people's books. Actually, my favorite way to read a book is before it's quite done. Yeah. Because then I can get, like, I like it in the Word document phase, not the PDF galley phase.
Totally,
because,
me too.
I know they're not going to make major changes for me, but I can participate with them in some of the dialogue and it's fun for me. And it also has a deadline and all that. You did this thing with Incorruptible where you had some software that you used that was basically collecting feedback from lots and lots of people. And so I guess my question is, how do you think about when to bring people in and to what end?
So you need to have what I would call trusted readers, like my wife. She can read stuff that is unbearable and it's okay.
In that case, the trust bar that I think about when you say that, and tell me if this is what you mean, is almost everybody who I'd like to read a thing, their opinion also really matters.
Really matters.
It has consequences is what I mean. And they might help me promote the thing if they think it's good. So I want to show them something that needs their input, but is already good enough that they'll like it and feel excited
100%.
about it.
And you have to trust them to give you the feedback in a constructive way. I mess this up with Lean Startup a lot. You don't want to burn the relationship.
Sure.
A lot of people with Lean Startup, I sent them a draft too early and then they would never read a subsequent draft.
Right, because they're like, this is going to be garbage.
People judge a book by its cover. The reason why you have to have an aphorism to not judge a book by its cover is because you need the aphorism because everybody does that.
Well, but you're describing judging a book by its first draft.
Heck, its first page.
Yeah.
I'll never forget this. The current chapter 1 of Lean Startup is good and it's very readable, but the original chapter 1 was in the wrong order and too dense and like really bad. The later chapters were great for a long time because chapter 1 was my white whale. And I didn't figure it out until the very end. I actually brought in a freelance editor who saved my life by helping me figure out what to do with chapter 1. I had sent the book to a ton of people for feedback and they all gave me the same big, they're like, this book is too academic. It's grim and it's just and I was like, really? The whole book sucks? They're like, yeah, the whole book sucks. And I was like, did you read the whole book? They're like, oh yeah, I did. And then I realized after a while that all these people were giving me feedback about chapter 1.
Yeah.
Once I realized that I sent the book out, it just started in chapter 2. And then like the feedback was utterly different. I was like, okay, good.
By the way, I think even to this day,
Yeah.
Lean Startup is one of these books, and maybe this is true of almost all successful books. The number of people who claim to have read it, that when I talk to them, I'm like, but that's not what an MVP is. The MVP is not just the first version of your product. But I mean, I guess that's also a hallmark of success.
If you want to put an idea into the world, you have to be ready to grapple with being misunderstood.
Yeah.
Which is really very unpleasant. Okay. So like, I remember before Clay Christensen died, I idolized him. He was like such a giant and such a gentle and kind person. There was this takedown article about disruption. And
disruption meaning, just for folks who don't know, when we say it's a disruptive thing, that's not just a word, that's a thing that's conceptual vocabulary.
Yeah, the conceptual vocabulary. His number one contribution that he's most known for is a phrase he called disruptive innovation, which is a very specific theory of how business unfolds. It's an empirically testable hypothesis. It's actually a controversial hypothesis among academics, whether it's true or not true. But anyway, every startup-y person you've ever met finds this concept extremely helpful. But it was so successful that the general concept of disruption became like a buzzword that everybody in Silicon Valley and beyond uses all the time, including quite often in ways that are not compatible with Clay. So a business journalist had just decided one day that any bad thing that a company had ever done while using the word disruption were the fault of Clay Christensen. And they wrote this big, long takedown of him that this is all his fault. My first reaction was my blood was just boiling.
Oh yeah, on his behalf.
Yeah, I was like, this is unfair. And he was at the end of his life at that point, and I was just like, I can't believe somebody who's like, all that he's accomplished has to read this piece of garbage. And I was ready to like set the whole journalism industry on fire. And then I had this moment where I was like, wait a minute. If this can happen even to Clay, is this my future? Should I just look at, is this like the Ghost of Christmas Future?
Welcome to Pivot.
Then I was like, oh my God. When I embarked on this journey, I really didn't grapple with the consequences of being publicly known at all. So they were all a surprise to me.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What have been the parts that you've liked and disliked?
Okay, let's start with the greatest of great things. By far, dwarfing all other things about Lean Startup is like, I get to work with startups and leaders and board members like every day of my life. I don't know how much longer this will last, but so far it's been going 15 years strong.
By the way, I feel so grateful that is now my occupation. Not because I'm like tech startups are the greatest thing ever, although they can be pretty great. It's more because you get to be around people making things and like bring their dreams to life.
Yeah, exactly. The invigoration of being around builders all the time, being around people who are earnest and who are trying to do stuff. And of course, if someone's reaching out to me, I'm getting already selection bias of people who are like a little bit more intellectual than average.
And also who want to hear what you have to say. You're not unlike when those VCs introduced you to the reluctant founder early in the journey. This is the opposite. There's pull.
It's incredible. The other, I think, more subtle thing is I don't have that like easy natural charisma of some people, and I'm kind of introverted. Like if I'm in a social situation, a work situation, I would often struggle. Like if I go to a convening or something, I always feel like I'm invisible. Like I don't really know how to get people to like pay attention. Here's who I am. And I would have this weird experience that oftentimes people would kind of dismiss me until I open my mouth. And I would like sit there and like wait and synthesize everything that's being said in the room. And this would be true of like at work, in a meeting, or like in a social situation, go to an event or something, some kind of workshop or whatever. And then I would like make a comment, and then people would be like, who's that guy? Like the way it felt to me is like I'm a ghost who just pops into existence the moment I speak. So like people know me for my ideas more than for me as a person. And maybe that makes me well suited to this job, because being the lean startup guy in a lot of rooms in the world now, I don't have to say anything to not be a ghost. I walk in and people know who I am and they know what I'm about. They like me, they don't like me, but like I exist.
Yeah, so it's a version of your reputation precedes you, which is really your ideas precede you.
Ideas precede me. I love that so much. It makes me feel, even when I walk into rooms where people are mad and they don't like it and whatever, it makes me feel like I exist in a way that is fun.
Awesome.
Third best thing,
please,
is in my little universe of celebritydom, which is not huge, but it's our world, I can reach out to almost anybody and get a reply. Because even though I don't know them, they know me.
Yeah.
I used to think it was just that they knew my name. But for a lot of these people, they have like listened to my voice, read the audiobook of the Lean Startups. They've spent 10 hours with me. They feel like they know who I am. And that has opened so many doors for me in the world. Like it's been, just from a professional networking point of view, it's the greatest networking hack of all time. Don't do it for this. It's not worth it but it's been incredibly valuable to me in my life. And it's allowed me to do so many cool things that is like super economically lucrative and intellectually interesting. And it's been a blessing. The downsides are very weird. I've been pitched a startup in a bathroom. I've gone to South by Southwest in its heyday and and created like a riot, like of people like who want something from me. But being misunderstood, I mentioned that's like the headline.
Painful.
It's really painful.
Well, and I guess what I hear in that, of course, is like this natural human desire to be known and seen.
Yeah, exactly. This is the dark side of that, is to be misunderstood.
Well, and I guess the dark side and the benefit are so deeply fused in the sense that you just have more surface area for people to have an opinion. And so more people are going to see it and more people are going to get it wrong because there's just more of it.
I can still remember one of the first blog posts that someone wrote that was of the form headline, "Nobody should ever listen to Eric Ries."
Right.
First sentence of the piece, "I've never met the guy, but..."
Right.
First time that happened to me, I was devastated. I was just like, you don't even know who I am and you're saying this?
Worse than people not noticing you in the room before.
So much worse. So I'm like, what have I done? And this, like, people have tremendous loss aversion psychologically.
Meaning that the intensity of losing something is much more powerful than the intensity of gaining the exact same thing.
Exact same thing. So once you have a reputation, now you have something to lose. So I used to be able to just spout off whatever I wanted on Twitter.
Before it was Eric, might be fake dinosaur character, probably not. But now it's Eric Ries, author of The Lean Startup.
Says this dumb thing or did. Yeah. So like I had that issue. And we went through a phase in Silicon Valley that I call lean washing, where people were slapping lean startup jargon on their same old crappy business plan and sending it to VCs. So then all these VCs were calling me being like, you have to stop this. You're full of shit. Like, this is terrible. And I'm like, this is supposed to be a good reputation. Like, now people are holding me responsible for every dumb thing somebody did while using one of my concepts. Just astonishingly bad. And I remember going back to that Clay Christian thing being like, oh my God, if people can misunderstand, his work is so clear. Say what you want about it, but he is an admirable writer and his work is extremely precise, really precise guy. And I'm like, if people can misunderstand that, what hope do I have? They always say that like all the good things in your life come from suffering, right? Like somehow the pain and the suffering of this, I did eventually get to a point where I was like, you know what? It's better for me anyway. I don't know how other people feel, but I came around to be like, you know what? I'm just going to take responsibility for this. At some level, it's not my fault. People, like so many people spout off about pivots or MVP or whatever who've literally never read my work and have no idea. Right. I got invited. I've been doing so many podcasts in the run up to this launch of Incorruptible. I did a podcast with someone who just truly did not know who I was. And he was like, so I don't know if you've heard of this word pivot, but like, have you ever experienced any pivots?
My guess is women experience this all the time where
All the
they
time.
literally wrote the book.
And listen, because I'm a man, it was completely okay for me to be like, do you know who I am?
Right, sure.
He didn't like yell at me for being a bitch. He was just like, oh, we should reschedule this, huh?
So what you're not describing is I didn't like being noticed at a conference and having people all around me, or safety issues.
Yeah, no, I was never stalked. I didn't have safety issues. Like I was actually really blessed. And I feel like I had like an optimal level of fame, which was like useful to me professionally.
But you can go out for dinner at a restaurant and the waiter is not,
When Web 2.0 was hyper concentrated in the South of Market area of San Francisco, and that's where I lived, it was a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Like my wife and I would go out to dinner and people would scream at us from the car driving by.
Yeah.
Like, so we had a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But that was hyper localized, and we just moved to a different part of the city, and it was completely fine. And there's perks too. Like I remember once being in line at a food truck, Koja Kitchen, which is now a cool restaurant in San Francisco. They started as a food truck, awesome MVP. And I get to the front of the line, and I order, and the person taking my order is like, "Are you the lean startup guy?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And like the food truck comes to an utter halt as like everyone comes out of the food truck. They're like, "It's the lean startup," and they're like, "You helped us start this
food truck is one of your things." That's great. A food truck is a great example of an MVP.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I was a woman or a minority, this story would be very different. I mean, I
very different.
I'm very cognizant of how much I look the part for this job. That's not my merit in any way. And in fact, I won't say who, but one of the big, incredibly famous Silicon Valley people who hates my guts, he had been developing a case against me. Anyway, long story short, we finally get to have coffee. And he's like, "Okay, you can come to me and I will sit with you and we'll talk about the thing." And I could watch the bias in my favor set in.
How so? Oh, meaning because of how you looked.
Because how I look, we're both very technical. I can talk the engineering language. We're both like, we have a lot of values and things in common. And just by performing for him the thing that he likes, I remember like he was like, somehow I pitched him on LTSE and he was like, "Well, I wasn't really planning to like you very much, but actually this is a cool idea."
LTSE, the long-term stock exchange.
Long-term stock exchange.
The next startup that you started.
By the end of this, he's like gone from my worst enemy to he's going to help me. And I was just like, if I didn't look exactly how I look, this would have been absolutely impossible.
Totally.
But fame also helps with that because we live in such a celebrity-driven culture. You know, the more famous you get, the more just there's people who want to be nice to you because, you know, they think it's going to get them something. So it has this like gravitational attraction that is both professionally very useful and interpersonally very treacherous. So it's definitely the whole thing is a mixed bag.
Can I ask on the mixed bag, just to continue on it for a second? Kids, how do your kids relate to their dad having a reputation, and their mom, of course, as well, having a reputation in this way? Or do they care? Do they not care?
They don't care, although you will this is the funniest of these stories that I can tell you. I don't think my son would mind you telling me the story. He was taking a writing class where like each semester they pick a different thing to do writing about. And unbeknownst to me, I thought he was taking historical fiction or whatever, but the teacher just made a last minute decision, asked the kids, I was thinking about making it into like a business class instead. Would you like to do that? And the kids were like, "Yeah, let's do that." And he comes to me one day, he's like, "Dad, can you help me with my homework?" And I'm like, "Sure, what's the homework?" He's like, "Well, we're making this business, like how to make a business class. And they said we had to do this assignment. We have to make a minimum something."
Oh, man.
And I was like, "Is it a minimum viable product?" And he was like, "How'd you know?" And I'm like, you know.
Do you know who I am?
You know, I actually, coined that term. It's in this book that's all over our house. And he was like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, you've seen it many times. We've talked about it many times." It was hilarious.
My micro version of that as a VC is I think I was talking to my daughter. Maybe it was my son. It doesn't really matter. We were on vacation somewhere. I was like, I have some advice for you on that. They're like, "Yeah." It's like, "Do you know that there are people who wait weeks to talk to me to get my advice?"
Oh.
And they were like, "Come on, that can't be right."
And what's so great about it? So I was like, "Okay, great. I'm ready to help you. Let me teach you all about this, whatever." He's like, "That's okay. That's all I needed to know."
Cool. I got it. Kids are an acid wash of truth in the most incredible way.
100% not impressed. To them, the fact that I'm a writer is a pure irritation because I disappear for stretches of time while I'm just writing all the time and I'm not available to do the things that they want.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, but so let's finish the drafts though. So in the case of Incorruptible, after you expand beyond trusted readers like your wife, you eventually got to this phase, and you probably had it with Lean Startup in some way too.
Oh, I love this phase.
Okay, tell me.
I think people dramatically underuse test readers. dramatically.
I mean, you 10x or 100x the test reader phase volume.
For Incorruptible, I had 600 test readers. They generated more than 10,000 individual comments.
How did you do? Okay, why did you do that? How did you do that?
Oh, it was the most fun. I loved this part of it. Okay, so for Lean Startup, I had to use Google Docs and stuff like that to collect comments. It was very cumbersome. Rob Fitzpatrick, who wrote the Mom Test, and Devin Hunt have this company called, I think the company's called Useful Books, but the product is called helpthisbook.com. It's just a tool. It's like a custom tool. You write your manuscript in Markdown or Word or whatever, and you upload it to the website, and it creates this reading interface where readers can highlight any passage and make a comment, flag it as useful or interesting or confusing or whatever, and then you get to sort through all the comments. And it's the first tool of its kind that I'm aware of, and it's really great. It's just a must use. It was really great. Most people, I think, show it to like 12 people and like get a few comments and whatever. But I was just obsessed. I found this like so addictive because I just was like, this is amazing. I was definitely their most outlier of users.
Why am I not surprised? But that's great.
Who do you think you're talking to?
So you use this feedback collection, but that doesn't help having, you still have a lot of fucking feedback.
Yeah. The way I used it was, this was my alternative to going on social media for a feed. For months, I needed no social media because I could just turn on Help This Book and just watch the comments as they came in. And I read every single comment, including if someone highlighted a passage, I would go look and see what they highlighted and read it. And the interface is very slick. It made it really easy for me to do this.
Got it.
It made the writing so much less lonely. I felt like I was in dialogue with people. I feel such gratitude to the people that took the time to actually read through. And in this phase, the restructuring, rewriting phase, you just can't tell if you're making the book better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the hardest part because the part of your brain that writes is different than the part of your brain that evaluates, and you can't have them both active at the same time. You just can't.
Got to have different LLMs. Right?
LLMs honestly have the same problem.
Yeah.
Like write me something 10 of 10 good and then give it a numeric rating and it'll be like, this is at best a 7.5.
Yeah.
But I told you to write 10%. It's just can't do it. It's not possible. So what happens is you work, slave over some chapter. You're like, finally, it's good. You read it the next day and you're like, no, it's not. It's terrible. So you feel like you're making no progress. You're running on this treadmill. You're running in circles. So having external reality come in at that stage is unbelievably useful. And now you asked when to show the book to people. The rule has to be whenever you can do so without enduring psychological collapse.
So meaning if you can do it without enduring psychological collapse, but they think it's a steaming pile of garbage.
That's fine. If you can handle the feedback and remember that the feedback is about them, not about you, it's always valuable to get feedback.
Well, to what extent are there readers whose real purpose is to feel like they gave feedback? I mean, you'll take their feedback, you want it, but the real purpose is to have them promote, blurb,
No. Those people cannot be in this phase.
Okay, so there's a trusted phase, which is like your wife, and then there's no consequence if they tell me it's garbage phase.
Right. The psychological safety is the most important resource. And that is a function of your own, where you're at as a writer. So like, it's a very vulnerable process to write.
Nope. You're asking people to assess a thing about you.
There's a lot of times when I would not look at the feedback. I couldn't take it. It would be too much. I would collapse. But there are also people who I wouldn't be able to handle it from. Someone I care too much about. Someone who I need professionally to like the book for some reason.
I get it.
There's like 100 reasons why. So for every person I would invite to be a test reader, I had to think carefully. And it's actually like loose tie connections are especially valuable at this phase. People you know a little bit, you trust them, but they're not like some VIP high-end person, nor are they like your oldest friend who, you really want to like the book. Yeah.
So you have this resource of safety, of willingness to take it in. Presumably you pick readers who you think are representative of the population of ultimate readers for the book, or no?
Yes, but you start, just like with a startup, you start with the early adopters first.
Mm-hmm.
You need to pick people, and I made this mistake also with Lean Startup. Like I sent it to some people who, like in retrospect, was very obvious they were going to hate it. And having a hater like barf all over your process early on is no good. You don't want that person's voice in your head, not helpful at all. So you start with people that you're like sure are going to love it. Because if those people hate it, it's more valuable feedback. You're like, see. If not even this person likes it.
That makes sense. I mean, look, I was honored to be an early one on Incorruptible. And then I remember hearing about others seeing it at the same time. I was like, I didn't know that person knew Eric at all. But what you're describing is a process where actually the closeness of the person to you, it's not that it's irrelevant. It's that there's value for mixing that up in the beginning. Some weak ties, and that makes a ton of sense.
People also have different levels of busyness.
Sure.
Some people, you send them the thing and they read it that day.
Yeah, I think I probably had like a month before I got
Yeah, who didn't read it like for a month or two. And I'm like, this is like dog years. Like a month is a really long time in
Totally.
this
Well, I
manuscript,
know.
right?
And what
Yeah.
was funny, by the way, in our interaction
Yeah.
about that, and one of the reasons the software matters, and this is where software is so important in this, and I'm curious about like,
Yeah.
did you write in Google Docs or whatever? One of the reasons I think the software matters is when I get a Google Docs version or a Word doc version of a book to read for comments for somebody, I knew that as I'm reading it, they're improving it, but how to, in the language of like Git, like how are we going to merge all that in?
No, that's the problem. It's a huge
But
problem.
with Help This Book, I think I sent you some guilty confession 3 weeks in of like, hey, I know you said I had a month, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet or something like that.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was after the deadline. I don't really remember. And you're like, that's okay because it's better now, meaning it was improving in place.
It improves in place. Oh, that's a huge reason why it's such a good piece of software. And in fact, when I started to bring in people for feedback, I was starting to do the structuring, whatever. Then I got into a cadence where I basically like releasing a new version of it pretty regularly.
Like software.
For just the same reasons you would do for software, even just to have the discipline of doing it.
And look, our website is hosted on GitHub because it turns out managing long strings of text is what software is.
It's what it's good for. I got to a point then where I was like, okay, there's like this restructuring, rewriting phase. And then there's really the like finishing the second draft, the near final draft, where you're like, okay, all of the structural big time problems are fixed. The chapters now work and stand alone together. You're starting to approach the proper target length. Remember, when I was restructuring, I think I mentioned I had to cut like 100,000 words out of an 80,000 word book. Like it was very, very difficult. So you get all that stuff behind you. You start to get on like a thing that's working. And then what I realized was I wasn't getting regular enough feedback. It was spiky. I would send 10 invites out and then I get too much feedback. And then I would have like a couple weeks with no feedback. I had a practice where I would like wake up every day and I just like, I'm going to brainstorm somebody to invite to the book today. And I just sent an email asking, would you like to be a test reader to at least one person?
So fun.
Every day for months and months and months. And what happened was over time, just through the law of large numbers, on any given day, odds were somebody would be giving me comments. So I was able to get more steady comments as we went. And I think that was really helpful for me in the writing process. The book got so much better. And like the more people you engage, the more you also create the surface area for serendipity. So many people would be like, oh, I know that person, or I know a story, or that's not accurate, or have you read this book, or whatever.
Love. I mean, look, in an ideal world, the way I think about it, and there's a reason, I actually think writing a book on GitHub would make a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah,
Because it would make it a more communal activity if the software were better for that. But in a certain sense, I guess what I see is previously, because of communication technology, you had to have a few readers, send them a thing, have them make the edits, blah, 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 and then get it out. You're describing something that looks like a more continuous glide path from your wife as the first reader to a bunch of readers, to hundreds of readers, to the book's out in public.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to me to make something, I mean, it's actually like software too. You go from waterfall to agile, or actually something even more agile than agile, continuous development. And so tell us about the software you used.
So eventually I got to the point where I was getting too much feedback to really be able to use it effectively. And I was very lucky with this book that this book's development coincides with the development of LLMs. So as the book is going along, the capabilities of LLMs are increasing. And the biggest breakthrough for me, I was really in trouble at a certain stage of this book, like the restructuring stage. I got myself into a point where I was like, I do not know if I will be able, my brain can handle the work ahead to get this thing done, because I was struggling with too much manuscript, too many cooks in the kitchen. We haven't even talked about this, but like now, unlike with Lean Startup, it was just me. Now I have like editors and a research team.
Right, sure,
and like there's like a lot of people involved. So I got a lot of mouths to feed and a lot of people giving me their input and whatever. I had too much research. I had just accumulated so much research because this book has it spans an incredible surface area of topics and things. So there's a lot of research, and I was really struggling to like synthesize. And the ability to build basically a custom rig, I use a software called Solve It, which is what we make at Answer AI. I switched entirely over to writing in Markdown. No more Google Docs.
For folks who don't know, Markdown is a simple way of formatting plain text so that it can later be formatted with chapter headings. And
It has like very basic section breaks and chapter headings and stuff like that. But it's much easier to move it around, copy, paste, do whatever, because it's all flat text. I've thought of it like a visual artist with a canvas. I would take a section of the book, a chapter or a section or a paragraph, whatever, however big or small a check I was working on that day. I would mount it onto my canvas, and then I would work on it for a while. And then I would set it down and mount something else. And when I had it mounted, I would be able to simultaneously see all of the research that related to this section, all of the reader comments that related to this section, and all of the input from my editor.
Fascinating. So you built software that
Yeah.
would do that and use the LLMs to process the text as well. Like when you got 100 comments on a section.
Oh, I could literally be like, okay, I'm going to work on this section now. Before I begin, summarize for me, what are all the comments like that relate to this section? What are the most frequent issues? What are the most urgent problems? Also, like, look at the last 5 versions and tell me how the comment sentiment has changed over time. That was like my 5 minutes of prep before I start writing. Let me have in my mind, what are the issues? And the other thing is I have ADHD adjacent brain for sure. So the hardest part for me of this stage of writing is just keeping track of all the things you have to do.
Yeah.
You have a 5,000 word chapter even can have 5,000 problems. Which one should I work on next? So I would actually use the LLM, not to write for me ever, to please don't ever do that.
But the executive function it did.
Keep track of where we're at. So I have young kids and I get interrupted a lot. So to be able to say here are the 21 things I need to accomplish today with this chapter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if I get interrupted, come back and say, where was I again?
Where were we?
Okay, summarize for me. What do I have to do? Just remind me the context. Okay. And then things like, I'm feeling stuck. Help me get unstuck.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, well, why don't we try this? And you'd be like, that's the worst idea I ever heard. Just having a bad idea helps your brain get it going.
All right. So we've been talking about how to actually make a book, but now we're going to transition a little bit to talking about actually putting the book in people's hands. I'm curious what, as a writer, gives you, what are the tells of this might be working?
Oh, yeah. You don't really know until you've had it go well and have it not go well. You have to have both things to compare it to.
I love that.
Yeah, very important to have the contrast. I didn't really know what this reception to this book was going to be like. But with my previous work, although people, loved it and have people to this day send me nice notes about the Lean Startup in particular, no one ever said that it made them cry. And the new book is much more emotionally resonant for people. That has been really interesting to see. And I could tell from the test readers that we were onto something. You could just tell if people are eager to help out, eager to be part of it, to spread the word, to be involved, to trade their labor. It's always such a great sign. But until you get the book out into the wider world, you just don't know how limited or how big that phenomenon is going to be.
Totally.
And just the number of incredible people who have said, this is the book of the year, it's the book of the decade. That's been incredible. That's a really good sign. And then, yeah, I'm doing podcasts and interviews, and, podcast hosts have been breaking down and be like, oh my God, what can I do to help you? And it's
I love it.
You didn't feel that way before the podcast, but now you feel that way after. That's a pretty good sign.
That's a good sign.
But the biggest thing is even people who have not read the book yet, and this to your point about promoting and marketing, if you look at the comments on some of the early marketing materials, people who haven't read the book are saying, this is the most important problem in my company, in the economy. This is an epidemic. People are resonating with it as so glad somebody's tackling this problem. So I feel like the early signs are promising.
Okay. So now, though, you alluded to having a base of different examples, and we'll kind of touch on some of them. But let's go back to something that you said earlier, which is when you were contemplating writing your first book, Tim Ferriss gave you some advice. And so Tim's now been a successful author, 4-Hour Workweek, et cetera, starting there. What did you learn from Tim?
Well, I was very lucky to meet him at just the right time in my life, because I had just gotten my first kind of couple offers from various publishers and things to write a book. He called me up and just don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything till we have a chance to talk. He hardly knew me at all. But he had spent a lot of time understanding the business book category in particular. Now, this information is dated because this is more than 15 years ago. We had this conversation. Now things are a little different. But he was the first person to walk me through what is an agent, what do the economics of the big publishing houses look like, what are the different pathways in publishing, and how do you optimize them for your goals. He was the first person to explain to me why everybody's so obsessed with being a New York Times bestselling author.
Why is that?
Well, he said, look, that we don't have a credentialing system for this anymore. So if you want to be a public speaker, you want to be someone who gets taken seriously in certain places in certain ways, how could anyone tell the difference between you and a zillion other authors who claim that their book is really successful?
Right.
Like it's still one of these, it's like one of the last remaining independent credentialing markers you can get for publishing. We eagerly need new ones, by the way. This one is very flawed. So if anyone's working on that, and over time I came to understand that people who make their money from being an author, a public speaker, or a consultant, that's really one thing. So each of those feeds the other. Well, you can see how that works. Like if the book is perceived to be successful, then that makes people more likely to want to have you come to their conference and talk about it. It's more likely that people will buy tickets because you're coming, because they're like, oh, that's a successful person, that kind of thing.
And so, but anchoring on the New York Times bestseller list, like people know it's important, but it sounds like it's even more important than you realize that it is. And I'm curious, like when you say that's not an ideal measure, there's a naive view, which is it's the perfect measure because it's literally just what is selling well. And it sounds like that may or may not be the case. So tell us about the New York Times bestseller list as a measure of success. And also, like I've heard some rumors over time that there are secret ways to get yourself up in the list, firms that help you do it.
You got to be so careful with this.
I mean, it strikes me as like almost like dark traffic on the internet when people used to buy penny traffic.
It's still like that. Yeah, for sure. Okay, but let's talk about the good part of it. First of all, like the New York Times provides a public service here, which every week they publish a list that's kind of like, if you care about books, here are the people you need to take seriously.
Mm-hmm.
It's nominally which books in this calendar week sold the most copies. But like everything in our modern world, it is actually not a literal list of who sold the most copies. It is an algorithm.
Right.
Algorithms rule everything around me. So it's actually not known exactly what are the elements of the algorithm, but having been on the favorable side of this algorithm and the unfavorable side.
Yeah, tell us.
So Lean Startup was an instant New York Times bestseller. That was my explicit goal with the launch of Lean Startup. And I wanted to make sure that people, pre-ordered the book. And, the nice thing about pre-orders in publishing is pre-orders all count for week one. So although you get to collect pre-orders over months, they all count as week one sales.
And my sense is also that the pre-orders give retailers a sense of how many to order.
Oh, yeah.
And then that if they order them, they put them on the shelf. And if they put them on the shelf, like the pre-order gets you in the airport, whatever.
Yeah. Fair. That's super important.
Yeah.
But you have to realize that like the New York Times reserves the right to exercise editorial judgment over this list.
Well, so meaning it's a algorithm with human review.
Algorithm with human review. Questions like what category should the book be in? Questions like, do bulk sales count for the total or they don't? What constitutes a real sale versus a bulk sale? They do sampling of only certain stores and not others. It's actually incredibly complicated. And I'm sympathetic to them and their goals because everybody and their mother wants to game this list. So of course they put defensive. But as a result, the list also reflects their biases and preferences in really important ways. And when I did the Lean Startup, I did all this stuff by myself. Tim had really taught me, like, here's how you make sure that when people pre-order the book, it counts for the list. And, we worked really hard to get people to do that. My follow-up book, The Startup Way, I did it in collaboration with my publisher at the time. They actually had hired me as a consultant to teach them how to do more Lean Startup-y stuff.
At the publisher, that's meta.
So I was really trying to be transparent with them, and we did it all together. And because it was so transparent, the New York Times decided it didn't count. We were being manipulative. And the follow-up book was banned from the list, as far as I can tell. It just did not appear for no reason. It was like such a huge blow to that book being seen, to the extent to which now many people, when they hear about the new book, is getting all this positive buzz. Literally, people are like, tell us about your second book.
Oh, that's
And I'm like,
funny.
this is not my second book. I actually wrote a book in between, but you didn't hear about it.
By the way, that gets back to your original blog post around don't launch, that sometimes if you put something out and it doesn't go right, it doesn't hurt you because nobody knows.
Nobody knows. I mean, right, that book could be great. It could be terrible. Most people have never read it, except in a very narrow niche of people for whom it's like their favorite book. It's really interesting. But it did not get that crossing the chasm moment that Lean Startup had, where it became a thing and then people started talking about it and then other people had to react to them talking about it and eventually the media has to cover it and whatever. That flywheel did not happen for The Startup Way. So I really know the difference. Believe me, I know the difference. Now, we'll see with Incorruptible. We won't know until it comes out whether the Times ultimately decides to count it or not count it. But I think that the way we've gone about promoting it is very different than either the previous books because the world is so different now. And I think, the orders that we're getting in, like there's a lot of real organic, genuinely diverse interest being spread out across many retailers and independent bookstores and all kinds of stuff. So hopefully they will not see it as a problem.
Okay. You're trying to get that perceived success, which is to
perceived success is such a funny thing. Like so many people want to jump on the bandwagon of a thing that's being successful.
Yeah.
And I've even been getting emails lately from people that are my longtime collaborators being like, oh, I see you tried to give me a chance to be part of this like a year ago.
Oh, that's fascinating. They want back in. I ignored you and that was a mistake.
And now it's a mistake. Now I see that it's going to be a thing. And it's like, okay, what's happened between then and now? The ideas didn't get any better.
Well, with all due respect, actually, I think that the ideas have gotten better.
Well, that's nice of you to say.
No, but I'll tell you why. It sounds like a nice compliment. You'll decide after I say it if it's a compliment or not, which is what I perceived as somebody, in dialogue with you throughout the development of many, but at varying, like sometimes we talked a lot, sometimes less, was that even in the last 3 months of you drafting, that process of getting all the comments really sharpened what ended up in the ultimate book.
That is fair, yeah.
So the telling and the ideas in a book are kind of inseparable from one another. I don't think there's such a thing as we have the ideas and then we have the telling of them. It's a much blurrier line.
No, it absolutely is. And these things matter. Like, in order to sustain the morale of the artist through this whole process, you have to believe, I think, that the ideas are really what's driving it.
Yeah.
And that it's the substance is what matters.
Fair enough. Because that one is easier in your mind to change than the other one.
And also, like, if it's all flash and surface level stuff, how can we ever compete with the celebrities who generate that stuff by the metric ton every day? Like it's tricky. But no, of course you're right that the product is the marketing is the product. It's all one thing. I really believe in paying it forward. So what Tim did for me, I've tried to do for many authors.
And you're going to do right now for everybody
listening.
And
I'll do it for
podcast.
all of you. Do the short version anyway. Okay, so the first thing is most authors wind up unhappy with their publishing process.
I've heard this from people too. They're like, by the way, everybody told me the publishing house wouldn't help publicize the book. It's true. It's true. Like, it must be shockingly true for everybody to need to keep repeating it.
It must be shocking. So there's so many things like this.
Yeah.
But I think that most people are actually unhappy, not because the publishing house is bad or whatever, but because they did not match the means to the ends.
What do you mean by that?
So you have a lot of choices about how to publish a book. The most prestigious thing by most accounts is to do it with the big trade publishers. These are the big mainstream publishers like Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House.
Yeah.
Those are the books you tend to see at airport bookstores. Those are the books that get wide distribution, that can be reviewed, that kind of thing. In the old days, it really mattered what the logo of the publisher was on the spine for getting people to take it seriously. But these days, it's actually, that effect is much less. But that's not the only way to publish a book. There are so many niche publishers that are still very prestigious. Think about having a Harvard Business Press book. That's like a totally different experience than a trade press. It has its other own pros and cons. Harvard Business Press does a great job of getting books into airport bookstores in particular. So each publisher has its own strengths and weaknesses. There are other niche publishers, think about like your O'Reillys or your Wileys,
right? Sure.
That have different trade-offs. And then you have a whole new genre of hybrid and innovative publishers of many different kinds. I'm sure we can talk about Authors Equity, my favorite, because they're my current publisher. They're a whole different business model, which is super cool.
Tell us about it.
So Authors Equity is a startup that is actually made up of many of the same people who published the Lean Startup. So I actually followed them to their new startup.
You mean when you say the same people, so meaning who was the publisher of the Lean Startup? Which company?
Yeah, Lean Startup was published by then Random House, now Penguin Random House.
Okay. And so the people who were at Random House at the time are now independent actors and they form some kind of rebel alliance. Is that the idea?
Yeah, they form a new company. It's just a straight up startup. It's called Authors Equity. And unlike the traditional big publishers, they don't pay advances. So it's a different economic model.
Oh, interesting.
It's more favorable to the author, I think. So I really like that. But they are partnered with Simon & Schuster for distribution purposes.
So Simon & Schuster sells it to the bookstores still.
Yeah.
But Simon & Schuster is not really getting the upside in the same way that a traditional publisher would.
They have a partnership with ours. Yeah. So it's all being handled behind the scenes. As an author, you want the distribution advantage of the big publishers, but you don't want the bureaucracy and there's a bunch of things about the economic model and the incentive structure of traditional publishing there. Not as good. Authors Equity gives you kind of a best of both, but they're not the only people trying to do things like that. Sometimes called the hybrid publishers or the new wave, like Spiegel and Glau is a really good one who's in that category. Upstart presses.
I love Spiegel and Julie Grau.
They're wonderful.
But now I get it, the same content. And Authors Equity, I notice, is run by the former CEO of Penguin Random House.
It's extremely convenient.
Yeah. It goes to show the powerhouses can go do stuff that is an innovative model.
Yeah. Then, of course, you can self-publish. And there's all kinds of self-publishing things. Now, when I was coming up, being self-published still had a real stigma about it. Serious books weren't published there where you couldn't get distribution.
Yeah, it's like a SPAC for going public.
Yeah. But the vast majority of books are bought on Amazon now. Like, it's a ridiculous percentage. I can't remember now, but a very high percentage. So if you publish with Amazon self-publishing, you could get like quite good distribution at almost no cost.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, I'll say as a reader, when I look at that, I think to myself, either this person is so famous they didn't need a publisher, or they tried to get a publisher and failed. Therefore, this must be a worse book.
That has always been the stigma with self-publishing. Yeah.
Right, but I guess the question is that to what extent is that still valid? Like,
well, it really depends on your goals. So
Right.
I know a lot of books that are written in order to create some other business process or opportunity. Think about the classic consultant who has a book that they hand out to potential clients as a leave behind. It does not matter who publishes that book because the client is getting it for free. Free.
I mean, it matters because as the client who's received those books, it's, oh, that's a vanity project of yours.
Well, exactly. What matters. So again, when we talk about what matters, it's really important, as always, in any, this is an old lean manufacturing idea going back many, many decades. You have to see the production process through the eyes of the customer. So now when I talk about means to ends, if I'm your consultant and I want to give you a leave behind book and I want you, Roy, to take me seriously, that becomes the defined problem I need to figure out how to solve. Yes, if I'm self-published, it won't be as good as if I'm published. But like, let's say I was published by Stripe Press. Stripe Press is pretty impressive. You'd be like, ooh, I like the Stripe brand. That's pretty good.
Also, they have very nice covers of the books.
It really, so for books that are going to be handed to a physical person, that matters a great deal. The thumbnail on Amazon you can't really see the beautiful binding on the thumbnail. So what's your goal? Who are you trying to influence? What's happening?
Yeah, that makes sense.
A lot of people I know, have disdain for the academic presses, of which Harvard is the most famous, but, MIT Press, all the major universities have their own presses. Those presses mostly publish academics, but they publish some non-academics too. Clay Christensen, of course, very, very famously was published by Harvard Business Press all these years. He was an academic, but his books were read way outside academia, is what I mean. So if you're trying to get credibility, like certain kind of authors really would benefit from the credibility of that. If you're trying to reach a technical audience, think about how many years the O'Reilly books were the gold standard.
Well, in a way, it seems like part of what you're doing as a writer is creating the work. And part of it is at several strategic moments, maybe the choice of publisher being the most important, you are borrowing the credibility of the publisher, which effectively says 4 different publishers. Well, they all have different things that, like, to me, by the way, the positive part of the self-publishing route is if I thought a book's appeal was that it was experimental, then the self-publishing route could be a real positive, because then what it says is I had something so different and so special, none of those dopey old publishers knew what to do. And so, but they all have, as you say, they have different messages intended to fit as part and parcel.
And remember, I'm giving you this perspective from a business author, nonfiction author, right? If you're trying to write fiction, like the speed and responsiveness of self-publishing has huge advantages. And if you're like a YouTube influencer who wants to turn that influence into something else. The other thing is these things are not mutually exclusive. So a lot of major traditionally published bestsellers in recent years were found on fan fiction writing sites and in the self-publishing world where like you can demonstrate the customer traction of your thing yourself. And then the publisher wants to jump on that bandwagon. Anyway, there's like so many options. It can be overwhelming. So rather than try to tell you the best option, my goal is for every author to try to get more clear about their own goals. So when I sit down with an author for the first time, I'm always like, why do you want to write a book? And I'll generally be like, well, I want it to be a bestseller. I want to reach customers with it. I want to change the world. I want governments and policymakers to read it. I want to be a public speaker and become super famous. I want to be on the cover of magazines. And it's like, well, that's 10 goals. If you had to choose though, is there one that's more important than the others? The people who say no are doomed. It's like, you got to have a priority. It's just too complicated otherwise.
Sure. Wait, so what's your goal with the current book?
Well, so for this book, I conceived of it as having 2 distinct audiences. I call them the why readers and the how readers. That's why the subtitle is why this happens and how that happens. Like it's very why and how. The why readers are people who want to understand why are we in the mess that we're in and what can they do about it. So that's not just founders and VCs and investors. Like it includes a lot of civilians, a lot of people who are affected by technology, affected by these major companies that are coming out, or who have a stake in our economy being more extractive or less extractive, which is like, that's pretty broad. But especially in that community, I was thinking about future builders. So another way I thought of it is like builders and future builders. So many of the great leaders that I work with and that I profile in the book, they had a pre-existing ethos before they were in a position of formal power.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, we want to reach those people. The how readers are people that are in the mess this minute and need practical guidance to get out of it. These are founders, investors, board members, leaders at any level who are like, I need the practical information to resist this corruption. Once you've identified like who do you want to influence, then you can start to think about what are all the different ways I could influence them. I could do a TV special. I could try to get on Oprah. I could distribute hand-printed pamphlets like the founding fathers did. You know, there's a million different ways you could do it. Why would you pick a book? Well, a book is especially useful if you need to create what I call conceptual vocabulary. You need to give a concept a name.
Sure.
Language is a social construct. So I can teach you a concept. And, you know, if I'm teaching you a math concept, it's really useful to you. Whether anyone else ever heard of it or not is irrelevant. But if I want to create vocabulary, I need it to be not just that you learn it, not just that other people learn it too, but you have to know that they know what that word means so that you can start using it. And you saw that's what happened to all the vocabulary in Lean Startup.
Totally.
It's not just that people that like Lean Startup know the vocabulary. All kinds of people that hate Lean Startup also know the vocabulary. You have to learn it.
It's almost like if you want to get a thing defined, instead of getting it in the dictionary, get it in its own book.
Right.
So you have whys of why should I run companies in this way? You have hows of I get that I should do something different, but my defaults are in this old place. Give me new defaults. Which one am I?
Oh, you? Yeah, you are like, and this is going to sound funny, but like, you know, the TR speech about the man in the arena?
Yes.
You know, I always send the man in the arena speech to anyone whose startup fails. You know, it's like my first thing is like, congratulations.
Your face is marred with blood, but at least you fought.
You did it. Credit to the man. So Roy, you are the man in the arena. So you are a how reader.
Thank you.
I know you have to play the other kind on TV sometimes.
I'll say the reality of it is there's a lot of how around many things that I do. And I'm also a how enabler for founders.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're in it. So
it's both and.
These concepts are going to be useful to you in your work. That's kind of like the how reader is someone who's going to put the ideas to work.
Put them to work. What I really need now, reader request, is I need the version of it that for a founder who is already somewhat sold on wanting to do this, gives them enough to get started, and then also makes them want to read the whole book.
There are QR codes in the book for those kinds of things, including ones that are tuned specifically for founders. So we'll get you all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's where maybe I've read the PDF.
Yeah.
Okay, but so before all that, though, or in parallel with it, and maybe you can tell us what the sequencing is like on this. It's like you got your strategy, you got your target publishers, maybe you know something, maybe you don't. But then there's this world of intermediaries. There's this world of agents.
Yes.
Do I need an agent? How do I get one? What do they do? Do I write a book proposal? Like, give us the auctions. How do we get from there to like somebody said, you got a book, buddy?
You got a book. I know there's so many steps. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like the key is to work backwards from goals. Okay. So I'll just tell you how I did it for Lean Startup.
Please.
And if your goals are different, the steps will be different.
Yep.
So my goal with Lean Startup was I wanted to create an artifact that someone could hand to their boss or to their VC and say, you got to read this. You cannot do that with a blog post. And you can't even really do it with a podcast today, although like there's some podcasts that kind of sort of have that cultural purpose, but they're not very durable. Even if you like saw the greatest podcast, but like a 3-hour podcast where this is the greatest thing ever, you can't send that to your boss. First of all, you're asking them to take 3 hours to understand a thing. It's like, no. But books, you still can do it. Books have this totemic power where you put it on your bookshelf and now that you're signaling to people, this is something that I stand for or believe in anyway. Very powerful.
Well, and I think part of that, by the way, like you and I have talked before about this idea that a blog post should have how much time went into it, not just how much time it takes to read it.
Yeah. The fact that books take such a long time.
It's so much human effort went into that thing. Even now in the era of AI, so much human effort went into that thing that's part of it's like, it's almost like it's seasoned by or cured by all of the labors that went into it, you know?
So I had that as my goal to create this kind of artifact that someone can show to their boss. So what does it need to be? It needs to be a traditionally published business book reviewed by real business, newspapers and magazines at that time. This is 15 years ago. Remember, this is a while ago. It needs to be a New York Times bestseller. It needs to have credentials that would make a mainstream business person take it seriously so that my early adopter evangelist types who are super into Lean Startup, I could help them accomplish their goals with it. That's really how I conceived of it. Talked about its entrepreneurs and the people that hold them accountable.
Makes total sense.
So to do that, I want the very best editor at the very best publisher to buy my book. That's now my subsidiary goal. Well, who's the best editor for this book? That's something we're going to have to figure out. But one thing you will learn about traditional publishing is the very best editors are deluged with proposals.
Of course. They're kind of like the very best VCs.
They're kind of like the very best VCs. Now, unlike in venture, in publishing, we have a formalized gatekeeper system of people called literary agents. When they call an editor and say, listen, I have a book that you should really pay attention to, take seriously, the best editors are like, oh, well, since we have a long-standing relationship, when there's certain people that like when they refer you a venture deal, you're all over it. You're like, yeah, I trust your judgment. Your track record is incredible. Like, I want to hear what you have to say. And there's other people that when they send you a deal, it goes straight to the circular file, right? So to get the best editor, you want to have the best agent. I spent a ridiculous amount of time on the question of who's the best agent.
Sorry, meaning you spent a ridiculous amount of time relative to more time than how important it was, or more time than you expected, or just a lot of time?
When I look back on it, I'm so grateful that I had the wherewithal.
You invested the time in the right part of the process.
Because Tim was like, well, I'll just introduce you to my agent.
Yeah.
Tim's agent is really good. But I was like, I want to make sure I know the very best agent for me and my project. So I went and met with a gazillion agents, but I didn't just meet agents. I met all the complementary roles to agents. I met editors. I met publicists. I met everyone who would work in publishing. I met authors, and everyone I asked the same question for my kind of book: who's the best agent? I'm pretty sure Tim taught me this trick. He's like, the good news is everybody thanks their agent in the acknowledgement section of their book.
Yeah.
Go to your own bookshelf or go to a bookstore and just sit there and take every favorite book you love, read the acknowledgements, just read them, but keep a tally. Who gets thanked in those? Anyway, I remember getting it down to like the 3 top agents at that time for my category. And they were all really good. I had great references, and I'd met each of them, and I talked to their references. Like, I'd really done my homework. And I remember sitting down with like a business editor.
And sorry, but hold on, because sometimes getting to the intermediary is the hard part. Did you have enough lean startup social media juice how were you able to get those agents to get your attention?
Yeah, we haven't even written a book proposal or anything yet. Tim was the one who explained to me, because for his agent, he was like, look, I want to arrange a meeting with my agent. In order to do that, you got to send me like a 2-page summary of the book and your platform. I was the first person who explained to me the word platform, which in the tech world means something completely different.
That in this case, it means your promotional platform for helping get the book sold.
Think of it as the entire universe is arranged on a scale from 0 to Oprah. And the scale is this: when you say, hey, everybody, buy this book, how many people do what you say?
Like,
if Oprah says, buy this book, millions of people do it. Most of us, maybe one person does it. So you're somewhere in between. And your goal is to show the publisher that like I have the credibility with an audience who are going to do a thing. So the 2-pager was about what is the book? What's the idea of it? And who am I and why am I a kind of person with a platform that this is going to sell some copies? And I actually had, unknowingly, I had written a review of a very obscure book. Really great. I wish it was more well-known in product development circles. It's called The Principles of Product Development Flow.
Okay.
Very difficult technical book. It's great. It's really good. And I was like, on my own, had written this like blog post about it. And the author, like, who I didn't have much of a relationship with, like, called me and was like, who the hell are you? And I'm like, why? It's like, you just sent my book to #1 in whatever on some category at Amazon. Like, I had like dramatically changed the sales trajectory of this book. This like old book. So it was great. I was like, oh, what a great story to put in my platform story. Like, hey, I can move books with my platform. I'm not just a random person. So Tim helped me get that 2-pager good enough for his agent, and then I used it with other agents. So to get a meeting with an agent, you got to get introduced by someone that they view as credible, and then you got to have some materials that they can read.
By the way, this is incredibly parallel to the process of starting a company. And one of my hopes across this series of interviews is, like, why are we doing this? We're trying to get people to see the matrix so they can be powerful, so they can have that moment. And so like, if it's like a startup founder recognizes a certain pattern and can apply it to this other domain, or vice versa, somebody recognizes the pattern in this domain and can apply it, I think that's a victory from my perspective. So, okay. So then you pick the agents.
I went back to one of the editors that I really liked and really like had a relationship with. And I was like, okay, I got to pick now. Tell me again who you think the top agents are. And they're like A, B, and C. And I was like, but if you really had to choose, is there one that like you'd say is the best? And they were like, no, I love them all equally. I was like, no, just between you and me. Then finally they were like, well, I guess if I had to really choose one,
I
think this person.
Well, and look, one of the other factors I've seen is you might have the agent who is known for being very good, but they take you on and you're a minor client for them.
So that's a huge issue. So the formula for picking the right agent is like, what is their current juice right now in the industry? Okay, that's actually very important because like they were really famous 10 years ago.
Yeah, meaning when you were saying like, I look at my favorite books, I'm like, maybe your favorite book from the last 2 years and not your favorite book from 15 years ago because it might be stale.
That's why you can't figure this out from the outside. You have to go
Yeah.
inside the industry to understand the reputational dynamics.
Makes sense.
Who's got juice right now? Second dimension is how much do they want to work with you? Like, how motivated are they to have you take you on as a client? As you say, many agents actually run an agency and you come in through the top dog, but then you get delegated to some junior person and they don't put their reputation on the line for you.
Totally.
Useless. And then the third dimension is don't forget that there's a substance to this. Do you vibe with them? Do you feel like they get your work? I think people actually overweight the third criteria and underweight the first two, but it's still an important criteria. The other thing that I didn't understand about agents is it's better if you conceive of the agent not as a gatekeeper or a judger of your work. Same with editors too. Just a good advice for all gatekeepers, I guess. If you send someone a thing and they don't like your work, and if you're like, oh God, my work sucks, like that's not helpful. You have to see these people as entry points into a machine. Publishing is this incredibly complicated machinery that very few people even understand how it works. So they can help you get the machine to do what it needs to do. So I can tell you so many stories of times in the publishing process where like my publisher wanted to put like truly the most abysmal cover you can ever imagine.
I mean, it's almost like if this was building construction, there's the idea of an owner's rep who looks out for your interest and sort of shadow manages the construction firm.
Totally. And so these publishing companies, especially the big ones, they work with so many authors and they view authors as kind of like irrational prima donnas.
Right, sure, of course. They can't differentiate between this is a good reason and a bad reason. Am I managing talent?
They don't know. You're just another whiny author, right?
Yeah,
you're managing
totally.
talent.
And by the way, a lot of authors probably are whiny and wrong.
I don't know what you're talking about,
Right,
Roy. We're also wondering. No, exactly. It's a huge issue.
But the point is that the agent mediating that for them is also a sign that the agent happens to agree with that comment.
Right. It's very important. Every once in a while, you have to have the agent intervene and say, listen, I need you to make this change for my author. And unless you're like one of the most famous authors in the world, the publisher can basically afford to screw you over. And there's more fish in the sea. It's an industrial process at this point. Whereas if you're with a top agent and only with a top agent, the other agents don't have the juice. But if you're with a top agent, it's like, is this worth souring my relationship with this agent over this thing? It changes the calculus. So it's very important to have the right agent on your side as your advocate through the process. So yes, you pick the agent. Then the next step is, for Lean Startup, my agent and I worked very hard together on a book proposal. You can look up online. These things have a template and a form. People race to build a book proposal, but like I would only build a book proposal with a partner like an agent who actually knows what you're doing.
And just to make sure that folks know, a book proposal, it's not like a 2-pager. It is like a substantive piece of work, dozens of pages, detailed writing, sample chapters. And actually, I think for folks to know, my sense, and you could tell us, is that the more you have a track record of book publishing success, the more your proposal can be, I wrote you a sentence and now we got a book. But if you're a first timer, you probably have to justify you can do it.
Yeah, exactly. If Stephen King is like, I'm thinking about writing a new book, they're not going to be like, well, I need to know give me 25. No, it's fine. But you would be surprised how much even established authors still have to demonstrate to the publisher. Because like the thing you have to understand about this is we are now entering into an economic transaction. Writing is a literary matter, an artistic matter at certain moments. And then it is a business matter at other moments. It's kind of similar to entrepreneurship and different from entrepreneurship in certain key ways.
You know, and the reality is, like, my suspicion is that we're going to have that across occupation after occupation.
Oh yeah, always going to see this tension. And so just you got to really understand which phase of the moon are you in? You know, like which part of the cycle are you in? You got to understand life is very different, you know, in the waxing versus the waning cycle. So in this, as we start to get into the economic transaction, now we're starting to see the world through the publisher's eyes. So the publisher in traditional publishing is going to pay in advance. And I remember telling Tim, well, I don't really need an advance. I've been very fortunate to be blessed with my work. So is that really necessary?
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, you do need an advance. I was like, why? He's like, you need to make sure, because we already talked about getting the top agent to pitch your book to the top editor. Now we need to make sure that the top editor is personally incentivized to do a good job with your book. Because every editor, and this is much worse now than it was even then, every one of these publishing houses is overworked to the nth degree. Not just the editor, but everybody's working on like 20 books at a time. Every list, they call it, the list of books that come out each season is long. Why are they going to put your book at the top? Why are they going to put energy into your book? The perception inside the publishing company needs to be that the company has invested a lot of money in this book and it needs to be a success or they're going to be in big trouble. So you need a big advance in order to have them take it seriously. So it's just like you have to learn to see the world through their eyes. You're trying to build a literary artistic project. They're trying to figure out how many copies is it going to sell. And I remember when I was meeting with editors and agents and everybody, I would always ask people, hey, do you mind if I bring you customer data? Because my whole thing was I wanted to use Lean Startup in the publishing of Lean Startup. And I literally had someone say to me, what do you mean by customer? And I was like, the person that buys the book.
Wild.
They were like, the what? They were like the category buyer at Barnes & Noble. And I was like, finally, like, no. I was finally like, the reader. If I had data about how readers behave, would you find that interesting? And they were like, what would that have to do with anything?
Amazing. But that's like the movie business or many other businesses where there wasn't traditionally an end user relationship.
Have become completely disconnected from the end user relationship. Anyway, so there's a lot of quirky things about it. My view is that if you have a good agent, they will be able to tell you exactly what's going to happen before it happens. So you show them a proposal and they can tell you this proposal either is or is not good enough to get the outcome you want. And we keep working on it till they say it's good enough. I know certain authors that I've introduced to very high quality agents who are simply too stubborn to take the feedback. Again, means and ends. Once you have committed yourself to the process that you are going to sell a book to a traditional publisher using a book proposal, the proposal has to be about the things the publisher cares about. And so many authors get the artistic part of this process confused with the business part of the process. The artistic process is like, what am I actually going to put in the final manuscript? When we're doing a book proposal, we are so far from the final manuscript, I almost think it's irrelevant. It's like tangentially related at best. We are trying to figure out what is the heart of this book from the publisher's point of view.
Right.
That's very different than the heart of the book from my artist's point of view.
Or from the reader's point of view.
Or from the reader's point of view.
Or from the buyer's point of view, because of course they need to be in it too, and they have their own incentives and all that stuff.
Totally.
So I guess I hear you saying that the agent is helping navigate you through what is ultimately a multi-stakeholder partnership of some kind.
Yes. If I remember right, the original business book proposal for the 4-Hour Workweek that made Tim Ferriss so famous, the original proposal that the publisher bought was called Drug Dealing for Fun and Profit. It was a very different book from the one that was actually published.
Wow.
Yeah. Because in the process of developing it and writing it,
it evolved.
It evolved. Everyone knows that's going to happen.
It sounds like the book made a pivot.
Oh, a pivot. Yeah, exactly. Huh. How about that?
Yeah, right.
So anyway, don't be too fixated. My advice from Tim gave me this advice. Do not be too fixated on the details that's in the proposal. Like, make it good from the publisher's point of view. And then if your agent thinks it's good enough, then you go to what's called the auction phase of the process. This is more like what a traditional venture fundraising process looks like, but the dollars involved are orders of magnitude smaller.
Right, totally. Yeah, sure.
My agent took the proposal to all the publishers that she thought would be good for it. I made a huge mistake psychologically because she was like, look, a lot of people are going to say no, but that doesn't matter because it's only a few people that need to say yes.
Sounds like raising VC.
But I was like, listen, I want to see all the emails you get back. I want to see the rejections as well as the yeses. She was like, no, you don't. You really don't want to. But I was like, no, I really do. And I remember there was some quirky thing where like she had sent it out on a Friday or something. So like the rejections all come back immediately. Friday night, I get 50 emails, of people being like, this is a piece of crap.
The barrage. Well, by the way, that is different from VC where they generally wouldn't even respond in a lot of cases.
Oh, no, yeah, that is the feedback process is super different from VCs. And again, because I had a really good agent, people couldn't just say no and be rude.
Right. So the agent, it was the intermediary who was able to get you the response. If you had just lobbed in your proposal.
No, oh my God, it's got absolutely no, there's no comparable role in venture, but maybe there should be. Anyway, point is I didn't get the yeses till Monday, but I got all the no's right away. So I had a miserable weekend being like, everyone hates my work and I'm a terrible writer and whatever.
Did you learn anything from it? Was it valuable?
No, not really.
Okay.
Because most of it was just like, this is not for us. It wasn't even saying it's bad. It was just this is not, we don't take this kind of thing seriously. Yeah.
It was a courtesy response without explanation, which is fine. That's better than no response.
Then you do an auction process is what they call it in publishing. So now everything's done virtually, but in those days I went to Manhattan. We spent a couple days together, my agent and I, and we physically visited all the different editors who were interested, sat down with them, did a meeting, pitched them on the idea. They pitched me on the publishing house. That's very similar to venture. And then some people did or did not bid. I won't get into all the mechanics. Just like in venture, sometimes people try to preempt the auction. And that just means you have an auction before the auction about whether you're going to have the auction or not. It's all very funny. There's all these customs and culture, whatever. And because traditional publishing is dominated by the advance, what's interesting to me, again, looking at this from a venture perspective, from a term sheet perspective, everyone's offering the same terms. Only difference is the advance.
And wait, what does the agent take? Is that always the same? Like, what's the math of all this?
Oh, everything is completely standardized. Your agent gets 15% of every dollar you get.
1.5.
1.5, 15. It's a great deal. If you have a good agent, they earn their 15%. If you're going to make X dollars, to be the same, you have to just believe that you're going to make 15% more money with your agent. And it's unlike VC, there's no serial rounds of dilution. It's your one-time dilution you take in the publishing process. It's a great deal for a good agent. But your interests are extremely aligned. They don't make money unless you make money.
Okay. And so you then have a publisher, you've negotiated a deal with them.
Yeah.
You've had the fortitude, by the way, to this point to already say, thanks, Tim Ferriss, successful author. I'm going to do my own research, which is awesome. I mean, you're really listening to your own voice. But is there anything else to know either about the economics? I mean, for example, people talk about like foreign rights or the audiobook.
Oh my God, there's so much. I mean, all this stuff gets negotiated. What was funny to me is we had an agreement in principle, like a handshake agreement with the publisher. And it was harrowing. The other thing about, people call it the auction. It really is an auction. Like over and over again, publishers would call my agent and say, here's my final offer. Eric should really take this one. And she would call me and say, look, this person's offering you 6 figures. Like this is, at this time, like very life-changing amounts of money for me. And I think we should turn it down. And I'm like, are you sure? Like really? It was like deal or no deal,
Fascinating.
Nope, I'm pretty sure we can get it higher.
Well, the interesting there is usually, while the interests are aligned in terms of amount of money, in many deal situations like that, an investment banker or real estate broker, that is only true if they're confident you're going to get a deal done at all. If they didn't think you were going to get a deal done, they'd be pushing you to take whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that is true. If your agent is pushing you to take the first deal, yeah, that again, somebody's gone wrong earlier.
Or speed, they don't want to spend more time on it.
You have to be cognizant of all those issues, and you have to be smart about it. And again, the best publisher for you might not be the one that offers you the most money.
Totally. Same thing in venture, by the way. The best VC for you might not be the one who bids the highest price. Yeah. In fact, it's often the reverse in some cases. Now, in publishing, I get the sense that may not be as much the case because they're actually, unlike venture, the advance is not the only resource they put into this thing.
No, nor is it the editor's own money.
Right.
It's actually a smart thing about publishing, for all the complaining we do about it. This is the old model. Now it's all breaking down. But in the old model, the fact that the amount of money that the editor bid is actually like a credible signal of their level of commitment to the book. So it is a valid signal to select on, because you're finding out who actually has the resources and who has the commitment to do a good job with your book. There's basically like resources times commitment is our magic formula that we're always looking for. So here you bring it down to one number. Now, as the business model of publishing is breaking, there are now more confounding factors. But yes, anyway, we had this handshake agreement. I can't remember. I think it might have taken like 6 months or 4 months, like a long time to actually sign the publishing contract, during which time we were wrangling with them about all the things that can be wrangled over.
Wow. So given the fact that it's standard, it still took that long from the moment at which you had kind of call it verbal agreement until you had paper.
Totally.
What's your leverage to make sure the deal doesn't go away?
That's what I was so stressed. My agent was like, you don't need to worry. Once I and the editor have an agreement, it's binding.
Okay.
Because if either of us ever defected at this stage, we would never work in publishing again. Right. Yeah. It's just like, it would be a career-ending maneuver.
Okay. So they had what we would call reputational leverage.
Reputational leverage.
And so they worked through all that stuff. Were there any particular ones that were important to you, like the audiobook or something like that? Or which foreign countries, what languages did it get translated into? I mean, I don't even know.
My dad is an audiobook connoisseur. So
That's funny.
The details of the audiobook production I had a lot of interest in. And the negotiations are always on the ancillary rights, because the main stuff is standard. But like at that time, gosh, I'm dating myself so much, but like hadn't even conceived of like AI training rights or whatever. This was more like digital reproduction rights. If I go give a lecture, an online lecture at Udemy or some new education startup, and talk about the book, is that covered? There's just what's covered, what's not covered, who owns what, whatever. So we were wrangling about that kind of stuff. There's always a certain amount of it because new issues come up in every era. So if you have a good agent, don't be stressed. It's going to be okay. And that's probably the book is still a year or more away, even after we've been working on it for 6 months already.
What happens in that period of time?
So, at some point you have to actually write the book. That's what's so funny.
Meaning
is like
the book is not yet written at that point. Okay. So you're writing the book during that period.
Yeah. And there's like a lot so there's just like innumerable steps between then and now. But once you have it locked in, you'll have a approximate deadline. You'll have an agreement upon when the book is going to be published, what season, and like which list it's going to be on, and a bunch of these other things. You work on all these different tracks in parallel going forward.
But what are you doing at that point to make sure a lot of people read the book? You have said platform,
Yeah.
I assume it's more than just I'll tweet the day it comes out.
No, a lot of authors are still in the stage gate waterfall style development process here, where you negotiate the deal, you write the book, you edit the book, you lay it out, you design the cover, you do all this, the real work of writing the book, and then it's done, and now you have this very narrow window at the end for promotional activities.
Yeah.
I really believe in doing the two things in parallel to a just outrageous degree in publishing. I was selling the book before it was even on Amazon.
What does that mean? How could you be doing that?
Yeah, I literally put up a web page that was like, here's the web page where you can pre-order the Lean Startup.
Great.
I assigned it an arbitrary price. I had no idea what it was going to cost in the end. In publishing, price is fixed, is set mostly by the number of pages in the book, which of course we didn't know yet. Value-based pricing indeed. And I didn't have there was no way to order it on Amazon. So I just said, well, that's okay. I have PayPal. This is before Shopify or anything. Like, I built my own website. I had my own escrow account. I was just like, look, if you want to pre-order this book from me, please do it. Now, why on earth would somebody pre-order a book a year before it comes out from a no-name website? We're like, that's crazy. But like, if you don't understand early adopters, then you don't understand anything.
Right, sure.
Yeah, so of course, some people would like to do that, and they wanted to be part of the journey from the beginning, and we created all kinds of reasons and incentives for them to do it. I did all that, first of all, because I'm promoting the book from the first day it exists. I'm in dialogue with actual readers instead of with hypothetical readers. And I have a platform for experimentation. We did split testing and subtitle testing, cover testing, all kinds of testing on that website. It was super important.
So you applied the Lean Startup techniques.
Well, I was really like, what am I going to do? Got to do it.
Yeah, of course.
And then, of course, I'm also doing things to build the platform as we go. Like, I'm talking about it. For Lean Startup, I did so many workshops and talks in parallel with the writing process. So like, I wanted to be able to go from an idea in the book to a test, to be like, does this make sense to people? Am I getting it right? Like, I was really trying to put the ideas into practice as I was writing. And that feedback loop between the marketing and the product like helped a lot.
Okay, so now tell us a little bit more about the associated set of activities. Like, what does an author in this category need to know about, they've gotten their book out in the world, they work with that big team at the publisher and a PR person and a blah, blah, blah. It's out. But then there's consulting and speaking too. Like, how does that fit into the frame?
Okay, so yes, if you're doing traditional publishing, the advice I got that I found really helpful was, for every job that you want the publisher to do, you have to do it yourself. Okay, so that means if you got a big enough advance, use the money from the advance to hire specialists in each of these areas and have your own thing. One of the things I like about Authors Equity is this was not nearly as necessary because, of course, we do this stuff collaboratively together. But for a traditional publisher, it's very important. So like, the publisher had their own publicist, I had an outside publicist. The publisher had their own editors, I had a freelance editor that helped me, and so on and so forth. Like, my good friend Marcus Gosling did the cover for Lean Startup, and for all my books, he's actually done it for me because he's just that talented. So you build your own kind of parallel team, like your shadow cabinet. Publicity has become so much less important than it was before. But yes, you want to have, if you're going to write a traditionally published business book, then you got to access traditional publicity resources to figure out how to get people to find out about the book. The same dynamics we've been dealing with editors, like that's true of the editors at the Wall Street Journal also, to deciding like which books are they going to review and whatever. You have to have somebody help you navigate, of course. And of course, a good agent will help you find all these people. Always like, how do you find all these people? It's like, well, I work with someone whose job is to know all the good people.
And so they are prepared for that shadow team. And then, okay, so that comes out in the world, but now give us the broader picture around your life as an author. I don't know, is like a book tour, is that part of being a speaker in this? Is it something different?
No. So the difference is, so when you're first publishing a book, your life goes through these stages, these like eras that are so different from each other. Like, you're catching me right now. I am in the midst of this incredibly extroverted, I've been doing podcasts from morning till night for weeks at a time. I scheduled so many podcasts that my assistant was like, look, we're running out of time slots to offer people between now and May. This was in like February.
Amazing.
I was like, well, we got to fit them in. Like, let's figure out how to get them in. Like, so I've just been like doing nonstop events, podcasts, whatever. In my kind of writing, podcasts are incredibly important. But like, 6 months ago, I was in a much more inner process of writing and grappling with language and whatever. So it's very different. So in this period, again, what is my goal? My goal is that the book goes out into the world and is taken seriously. The number of things I've done where someone's like, listen, I'll pre-order 100 books for you if you'll do XYZ for me. The book costs $32 at retail. Okay, so someone who's offering to pre-order 100 books is offering me roughly $3,000 of value. In my real life, I don't need $3,000. And when people want to hire me to do something like this, it's much more expensive than that. That's just supply and demand. But all of a sudden, now I'm like desperate for people to pre-order the book and to like put that, because like, what do I want? It's not, if someone buys the books and put them in a warehouse, it doesn't really help me. But if they will give the book, put the book into the hand of an entrepreneur or someone who's actually likely to like it on launch day, it's worth dramatically more than the same book purchased even a month later. As a person who's very busy normally, it's also been kind of a blessing. I have the like privilege to get to do stuff that otherwise would be economically irrational for me to do.
You wouldn't be able to justify. I think that's a really cool way to look at it. And is there other stuff around that moment that is worth noticing? So like you're talking about media appearances, but is there other stuff are you handling social media differently?
Yeah, of course. I'm like very active on social media when I normally don't use social media at all. And there's like people I've been working with that help me with social media. It's like everything has like this like broader team of people that has been incredibly helpful. I have the team at Virgil, the law firm that I helped start that does, AI powered, low cost, flat fee, legal and back office kind of stuff for startups. You should check them out. Tryvirgil.com. Very, very cool company. They are really aligned with the book because they do mission driven incorporation and term sheets and whatever. So they've been really helping me like develop the bonus. I was telling you, there's bonus content and all this extra stuff. There's going to be like a affiliated workbook and implementation guides. We're going to do an incorruptible term sheet. We're going to do sample incorporation documents. So just very helpful to have people in each of the areas who can be helpful. And so I have this like very large extended team of people who are helping me. So I don't want to claim that like I'm doing it all myself, but if you look at all the things that I'm doing to promote the book, I'll probably do 150 podcasts, 50 events, something like that. Like
Wow.
It's hundreds of things. The vast majority of those things, and this is hard for a lot of authors to accept, unless you are a bona fide celebrity. My experience is the vast majority of things you will do that will move the needle for your book, you will do yourself. Like I initiated them. I set it up. I asked Roy, my friend, will you do this event for me?
Yeah, totally.
If I hadn't done that, it wouldn't have happened.
Totally.
It doesn't happen by itself.
Is there a tension between those two modes of you as the inward, authority contemplator,
very difficult
assessor?
To manage.
Like one of the weird things that happens is you got to assess people. Like, did they do a good job in this startup or this company? And then their company might also pre-order the book. And so how do you handle the conflicts and tensions between being a brand personality promotional engine and an authority critic, evaluator, expert?
So first of all, it's just a tension. You just navigate it.
Yeah. Okay.
First of all, like if you don't have principles, then
right.
You're going to be corrupted. That's like it does. So, I try to be I try to keep things very separate, when I'm advising somebody about their startup, like people I have like advisory relationships to, I don't ask them for favors.
Yeah, sure.
Like so I have clear rules about that stuff. But at the end of the day, I think the thing that helps me the most is I really conceive of this as a time limited window.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do a book tour between the books coming out May 26th. I just did my first wave of in-person events that was like, I did one in each of the Bay Area major cities. I did one at Stanford, one in the East Bay, one in San Francisco, and one in Marin County. And that was great. I did those in like 3 back-to-back days, just like boom, 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 boom. That was kind of like a little test run. The proper book tour, the first event is May 18th in San Francisco. And the last currently scheduled event, I think, is June 22nd back in San Francisco.
So you got a month, basically.
It's basically like a month. I'm going to be on the road. But that first week, especially, I'm doing events every single day.
How do you stay relevant after that first week?
Well, so here's the thing. It's really important to not worry about that.
Uh-huh.
Because one of two things is going to happen. 2 months from now, I'm either going to have a lot of free time in my hand.
In which case, then you can put it into promoting if you want.
Then I could decide to put it into promoting the book or whatever.
That makes sense.
Yeah, there's nothing I can do about it right now. Or I'm going to be so insanely busy that what my plans now don't matter either. Yeah, either way, don't worry about it.
How about reviews, social media commentary on it? I mean, there's this whole world where, like, I imagine the old world of the New York Times. And then there's this new world where it's like you do your DIY pre-orders. Do those even help, by the way, for the pre-order for the Times?
It depends on the details of how the orders are placed. You can't imagine how much energy I put into it.
So you put a lot of energy into trying to game it as much as you could in a legit way.
How dare you suggest that I'm gaming the system, Roy? That's outrageous. All my orders are 100% legitimate.
You legitimately played into the absolutely meritocratic, perfectly judged system created by our friends at the New York Times.
I play by the rules as established by the people who run the rules.
Of course, I know you do.
Because you asked me before, aren't there dark patterns here? There literally are vendors who you can call them up and they have a price list. What list you want to be on, what ranking you want to be. Here's how much it costs. And if you wonder why politicians and all these rich and wealthy people always have a #1 bestseller,
Game in the list.
they just pay the money. I refuse to do that.
And what do those guys even do, though?
No one really knows.
Presumably there's some one magical store in Phoenix that is actually the place that drives the pre-orders or something like that.
I'm sure what it is they have a giant network of people who have agreed to walk into a bookstore and buy the book in the exact right configuration and volumes to produce the outcome that the algorithm really likes. It was funny if you do that kind of stuff. The dark arts are dangerous. People always view that as like a sure thing, but there was a big expose, like this is maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where one of those vendors was exposed and all the clients that work with them like was revealed. And then all those people got blacklisted and had this blacklist. So like security through obscurity. Don't get away with it. Just try to do the right thing in the first place.
Yeah, fair enough.
Anyway, I do put a lot of energy into, people ask me, can I get you to do this thing? I was like, yes, will you pre-order some books? Where should I pre-order the books? I want you to order them from your local independent bookstore. Or here, I want you to, I do try to get people to do the thing I want. I don't want to hide that. I think it's a really important part of the job.
That makes sense. But part of that ecosystem, though, is, we're talking about podcasts and there's Substackers and there's official reviews, but there's also like people randomly commenting on social media. There's Goodreads. And so how does the response to the book play into all of this?
Yeah. So I got really good advice from James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually the co-founder of Authors Equity.
Oh, interesting.
And Atomic Habits is like one of the very best-selling business books of the last, I don't know how many years now. So it's so successful that like, generally speaking, the #1 slot on the bestseller list is no longer accessible to new books because Atomic Habits sells so many copies in every random week. You can't sell enough copies to displace James from slot #1. That's how successful he is at book marketing. So he knows a few things about it. And he was the one who was like, look, the world now is podcasts and Substacks and social media. So like, you want to find communities that already are extremely online and love to talk about whatever their thing is and try to get your book to be a thing that they talk about.
Got it.
Right? Rather than try to get people who love the book to talk about it, find people who are already talking all the time and get them to mention the book. So like, he gave me a bunch of tips about like how to like DM influencers and just like, if you have the stamina day in, day out, like I try to do this every day now. It's like on the major social media platforms, who are the people with influence? Like, hi, I'm Eric Ries. You may remember me from such movies as The Lean Startup. Like,
I got this new thing coming out. Let me know if you want to talk about it.
Can I send you a copy of my book?
Right.
And this is where having a lot of goodwill built up matters a lot. But so many people write me back. They're like delighted that I reached out to them. And I'm like, great, I'll send you a copy. So you put copies in people's hands. I was at a conference and a VC who I really like came up to me and was like, hey, how's the book going? How are you doing promoting it? I'm like, telling him about the things I'm doing. He's like, well, you're doing the Bill Gurley strategy? And I was like, the what? He like literally pulls up his phone. He's like, hey, I got this DM from Bill Gurley. He showed me the DM. I was like, hi, like, I want to send you, like, here's my book. Here's why I wrote it. It's very personal to me. I'd like to send you a copy and I'd like you to take a, I think it's like take a selfie with it and also review it on social media. I'll send you a book if you'll do this thing for me. I was like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. It was like so simple. And I realized what was going on. We talked before about how the social media algorithms have changed so much in 15 years. It is very difficult to reach your own followers on these platforms. It's so frustrating. The typical post, even though I have hundreds of thousands of followers, it's very common for a typical post to get like 1,000 views. And the more thoughtful and nuanced and interesting it is, the less views it gets. If I write some like absolute ridiculous rage bait, it gets hundreds of thousands of views. So if you want to like tell people I have a book coming out, those posts are suppressed by the algorithm. They do not want to hear about it. If I rant and rave about how AI sucks or whatever, algorithm loves it. A really awesome friend of a friend does like Instagram posts and stuff for authors. And he said, I'll help you do some actual Instagram videos. And I've never been on Instagram in my life. It's funny. I knew the Instagram founders, but before it was called Instagram, but I personally do not use Instagram. Anyway, he's like, look, I'll help you do it. And I was like, really? Do we really have to do this? He's like, look, here's the formula. You have your hook. You say the hook. Then it's like, they say, hi, I'm Eric. Here's why I blah, blah, blah. And here's my thing. I was like, this is not, I felt so artificial doing it. It's so silly.
Cringe.
But like all the normal videos I put on TikTok or Instagram, whatever, get no views. The ones that I did follow the formula get like 10 times more views. I was like, well, okay. Is that because people love that formula? No, it's really important to remember. It's because the algorithm loves that formula. Anyway, DMing people is the last remaining way you can talk directly to your own audience. So of course the platforms throttle it. But if you start early enough and you're willing to do it every day, you can reach an awful lot of people.
Okay, so let's now zoom out. You and your life. In addition to the writing, you've got consulting and courses and startups. How do you think about how to fit this writing into the broader sphere of things associated with being an author, like
Yeah,
consulting
yeah.
and speaking, and the other stuff in your life, which is to say, like starting startups and doing all kinds of other things?
Yeah. Very, very carefully, as the
Yeah.
saying goes. Yeah. Like, so for me, I feel like I am very blessed that the thing I happen to like writing about is also considered to be economically valuable. So as much money as I've made as an author, and it's considerable, I'm very blessed by that. I've made far more money from the economic opportunities that the book has afforded me to have. That's true, I think, for a lot of authors, just the scale is different. Most books have a natural arc to them, or like Lean Startup is still selling very consistently after 15 years, but it's like, it's not the level it was when it first came out, right? It settles down to a stable thing. And, now Lean Startup is incorporated into like lots of university curriculum. So therefore students are buying the book like every semester, right? Like it has certain recurring sources of revenue that are attached to it. And other authors stack this passive income, one book after another, and then they become very wealthy that way. That's not really how I'm wired. To me, what's interesting about being an author are the many, many, many other opportunities that it unlocks for you. So like I got to travel the world and be a public speaker, getting paid exorbitant amounts of money for that. Like I feel so grateful that is possible. It's been really interesting. People still come to me and ask me for advice about their startups. So I get to be an advisor. I get to be an investor. I get to be on the rocket ship with them. And I'm able to do all this without requiring an institutional affiliation. Some people really want to become a tenured professor.
Right. Like your institutional affiliation is author.
Yeah, like I get to be I have my own freedom of time to a degree that is not possible in any kind of institutional context. So like I start companies, I'm involved with companies, but like it's always because I choose to do it, choose to get involved. And I try to avoid the kind of entanglements that are like, now my time is spoken for and other people control what I do. Because I want to maintain my freedom that if I discover the next thing, I can jump on the next thing. I'm not always tied to the previous thing.
That makes sense. And so if your primary activity were being an author, it would be different. But you've got, as is true, I think, for many business authors, they've got an associated system of things.
Yeah. And which thing you view as the primary thing affects how you go about things.
Totally.
I know many authors for whom being a consultant is their main thing. So the book feeds the engine of the consulting company and allows it to grow and scale. That's totally legitimate. There are people who they really see themselves as a public speaker. That's a wonderful lifestyle and a very lucrative way to make money. And the best thing about being a public speaker is you go in, you give your talk and you leave. You're not encumbered by what happens afterwards. So you're getting paid to market yourself and your own product. It's a wonderful flywheel.
And so now let's just talk about the broader system for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Does the book publishing system produce good books?
Well, yeah.
Or how well does the book publishing system produce the books that we need?
Yeah, exactly. I think, unfortunately, we are entering into a more and more and more celebrity-driven culture.
In general,
which is really having a very negative effect on publishing and podcasting and social media too. But like, I just feel like given the way the attention of these platforms work, like all the returns are coming to the celebrities. So like the reason why billionaires are like desperately trying to become celebrities is because like celebrity is such a source of influence and power in the world.
And wait, before we get to the celebrity analysis of the industry, let's talk about you for a second. Because we alluded in the beginning to your fame and like, I think you were also telling me your hair changed between, first book and second book. So now nobody recognizes you because it's the old hair, Eric. What's the inner side of that like for you? Like, do you feel doubts? Does it feel uncomfortable?
Oh, of course. Oh, totally. Like I'm a very introverted person, actually. So to me, engaging in the world socially is a drain of energy, not a source of energy. So I like doing it for mission reasons.
Right.
I used to do the Lean Startup Conference before the pandemic.
Oh, I remember.
But after a week of doing that, like I would need a week off. I know extroverts that would be their most jazzed week of the year. I'd be in bed.
Totally.
So I've definitely had moments of doubt, being like, what am I doing with my life? I've been pitched a startup in a bathroom, like I've had a lot of weird experiences. But the flip side of it is I feel like I have a really optimal level of fame. I'm actually very grateful for it. I'm famous enough in my world, in my industry. Like if I approach a founder or a VC, and like classic thing for me is a founder calls me, they've read your blog post about the double opt-in intro. So like, Eric, can you get me an intro to investor X? First of all, for a lot of X, I already know the person. That's really nice, really useful. But for people I don't know, I can just call them a cold email. Hi, I have a founder that wants to talk to you. Like I get an incredibly high response rate to that email because people know who I am. Like we've never met, but they know my work. They feel like they trust me. They have some kind of reputational relationship. So that is amazing. I love that. if I go, there's so many rooms in the world now where I will be taken seriously by default. And, is there gender and racial bias in these things, like, to an incredible degree? But I look the part, so it's always been very beneficial to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask about that. And obviously, we're two white guys talking to each other. Tim Ferriss is the guy who brought you in.
No, it's like the system is absurdly biased in so many ways.
So, okay, so let's name one flaw in the system is bias.
Yeah.
Are there other ways that systematically the system either does or doesn't encourage the kind of books that you think
Oh, yeah.
we want?
Very little of the industry is focused on the question of merit.
Yeah.
Like, unfortunately.
Meaning, to the extent the kind of books we want are the kind of books people will buy, then great. But same as any other industry
Well,
where...
no, I think it's like the difference between hits and batting average.
Yeah.
There's been no sabermetrics revolution.
Yeah.
Moneyball has not come for publishing yet. So, for example, in the olden days, you'll hear people talk about the olden days of publishing a lot. They'll say, like, a first-time author could, like, write a book. An editor would just be like, I believe in you and your work. This is awesome. Write the book, publish it. Basically, nobody buys it. And they'd be like, okay, but let's try again.
Yeah.
And they'd be given this runway to develop their brand and reputation and whatever. Now that is almost completely gone. What's so silly to me about it is, in the era of surveillance capitalism, we should be able to make these kinds of judgments way better and more efficiently than ever before. So, like, it's crazy to me that there's not just a regular system that the publishing industry, like, if I was running a publishing company, I would be obsessed with the farm system. How do we make it easier to get people published at low stakes?
And wait, but is Substack not that?
No, because again, everything's about gross totals. I don't even know what the batting average is. It's like, I need to know, like, what is the percentage of readers who look at this book and who are converted to its thing? Who percentage of readers who, even just a simple thing like, which authors in the world have the highest book completion rates?
Right. Wild that we just don't know. And okay, so now I'm going to ask you about big, complicated issues you can take a second and think, but for almost like one sentence takes as they relate to this.
Okay. All right.
Amazon, what's the take?
Oh, gosh. Ben Evans has a great article from years ago where he says Amazon is a machine for turning more of the world into Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
So for better or for worse, that's what it is.
Well put.
It's incredible.
But then the data is presumably available. Like, they know the Kindle completion rate data is just not being used to publish.
That fact that data is being proprietarily held by Amazon and not used to make the world a better place is an enduring tragedy.
Okay. Next one. AI,
Well, speaking as someone whose lifetime output was involuntarily added to the training data of all these models.
Yes, of course.
I have very mixed feelings about it. I think we could be doing something much more fair about those issues. But I always tell authors and everybody else who comes to me about this, I say, look, if you think being involuntarily included in the training data was bad, try being involuntarily excluded. That's going to be way worse. So we're all in a kind of catch-22 with it. So,
I mean, of course, it's always this devil's dilemma.
We should have a more fair setup, yeah.
Okay, next one. Airport books.
Not a fan.
Why?
Speaking of someone whose book is sold in airports, so, a lot of airport books are just very vapid. So
okay, so let me do back to your inner life, which is holding all these tensions of, like, author as expert, promoter, writing for sales versus writing for landing the ideas. When we, like, see inside Eric about your feelings around being a writer, the easy and the hard, what do we see?
I love being a writer. I love it. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't allowed to do this. I've had other jobs and other things I've been good at, but I really I feel very lucky that this is something I get to do.
And then very last one, aspiring writer wants to do a book. What do you ask or say?
We've kind of gone through it all. Now, it's funny, like, a lot of this conversation is very similar to the conversation I would have. The only thing we have to really understand is why.
And in fact, Simon Sinek has a very widely published book on precisely that.
Yeah. What's it called? Start with Why?
Yeah.
Isn't that? Yeah, Start with Why. Yeah, you could probably get it in an airport bookstore right now.
I'm sure.
Simon has sold a lot of copies too.
Yeah.
He's awesome. And the fact that we can make that joke says a lot about the power of books, right? Like, Start with Why went from a, like, piece of folk wisdom,
yeah,
to, like, the thing that Simon Sinek put in that book. Even people who've never read that book
totally
have no idea who Simon Sinek is.
Well, they know the TED Talk, and we didn't even talk about Ted's special lane, TED, Oprah, Reese. I mean, so many things we could literally. I mean, we've been going for hours, and I feel like we could keep going for just as many hours. But that's really helpful. Last one. any cutting room floor stories, like some anecdote or something about the book process?
Here's a funny one. When authors get together, one of the things we love to gripe about is whose publisher proposed the worst cover for their book.
Oh, I love that.
And I think a huge part of the problem in publishing is, again, the waterfall style development. So a lot of times, like I remember the first round of covers I got from my publisher for Lean Startup, they were so bad. It was like a bunch of them featured like an emaciated dog statue and other like real weird stuff. What had happened was they had like just farmed the work out to some random designer and given them no context or information. I think they might have
They
known
just
like,
had the title.
maybe they only knew the title. They knew nothing at all,
Wow.
no context at all. And so they had like done their best. Again, I don't blame them. Anyway, these covers were so bad that like, if you think about like rock, paper, scissors, we would always play when I would get together with all these people like, oh, my publisher, their cover sucks. And I'd be like, my cover sucks. And now, in the age of smartphones, I'd be like, I'll pull up mine.
You show them both and they're like, okay, yeah, yours is worse.
I've never lost that competition ever.
Amazing. Okay. And why should somebody read Incorruptible?
Well, you want to know why the world is the way that it is? You want to know how we're going to get out of this mess? If you feel like the economy that we see is beset by corruption on all sides, maybe you'd like it to be different. Maybe you'd like this book.
Epic. I would like it to be different. And I'm grateful for you opening the door to people both through what you write and through talking about how to be a writer. So, Eric, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for giving me the chance to go behind the scenes.
This Is Not Advice actually started as a series of hundreds of short answers to people's dilemmas at work. So if you're interested in more, head on over to the website, thisisnotadvice.work, which is a guide based on all those questions and answers, which anyone, including you, can edit. And if you made it this far, I'd love to hear what you thought of the long form version of This Is Not Advice about a whole occupation. As my coach tells me, your feedback is a gift. I'm Roy Bahat, and thank you for listening.